Absolutely. Thanks, Mario. Like Mario said, it is hashtag #ScamLab. If you haven't tweeted it, definitely go out and tweet it. I think right now it's got a little over 100,000 views just in the last about 90 minutes. So about 1,000 views a minute here on Twitter, and we've launched it everywhere else. YouTube, Telegram. You can find us everywhere. So let's get some more people here. I see Heather is back. Welcome, Heather.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Awesome. RC, let's get RC a speaker spot. And there's Brendan Leslie. Brendan Leslie, welcome to the Project Veritas Twitter space.
My favorite people.
It's good to have you. Good to have you, man. I see Ian Miles Chong is back. All right. All right, so Mario, if you want to kind of take us through, I think for the listeners, we want to go back to yesterday just briefly. For those who are joining in for the first time, let's just kind of go over, the part one release. Quentin Bostic, the quote evil salesman, how he characterizes himself, and I'll let you take it away there.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so today is the second release, right? So yesterday we released a story on this teaching lab content manager. His name is Dr. Quentin Bostic. He has a PhD in education. And he, in this first video, speaks about how he sneaks in CRT, which is critical race theory, into the school curriculum that he sells to different districts. He mentioned specifically Cobb County and Fulton County in Georgia, where the curriculum is being sold. And he hides it as DEI, which is known as diversity, equity, inclusion, because in Georgia and other states, CRT is actually banned in the education system. So that's how he avoids being caught. So that was the gist of that story. Tonight, we have Quentin Bostic again, but this time he's speaking specifically about his employer, Teaching Lab, and he himself refers it to Teaching Lab as a scam lab. I'll read a few quotes from the story tonight. Dr. Bostic says, "My boss," speaking about Sarah Johnson, the CEO of Teaching Lab, "is a freaking psychopath. She's running a nonprofit, but it's for profit." And then Dr. Bostic talks about a specific conversation he had with Sarah. He says, quote, "I said, so hypothetically, these people, such as the Gates Foundation, are funding you to build a program. Once the grant is over, you take the program, you sell it to people for money." I was like, "Is that legal?" She, Sarah Johnson, was like, "It has nothing to do with me." She said, "The grant ended, we fulfilled the grant." And I'm like, "But we're selling a product of the grant." She's like, "It's not my problem." And I'm like, wow. She's like, "It's not nonprofit work. People do it all the time." I'm like, "Sarah, is that legal?" And to conclude here also, another quote, Bostic says that his colleagues, I quote, "I have people on my team who have never taught before, but no sales." Literally, they say, I hate kids. I'm like, don't say that in front of a partner. Just keep it to yourself. So just here, to summarize these quotes, you have Dr. Bostic speaking about how Teaching Lab is a nonprofit, by the way, funded by Mackenzie Scott. Very big money is going to Teaching Lab, and they operate in over 20 states in the country. Speaking about how they, act as they're a nonprofit organization, but in fact, they're using these nonprofit funds and then transforming it into a way where they can sell it for a profit. So that's according to him. And then also you have here Dr. Bostic speaking about how they actually don't really care about kids. They just want to make money off of them.
Yeah, so we are here in Atlanta with Education Veritas, and we've dealt with this with the private school sector, and it is an enormous effort being pushed by the NAIS and all of the related organizations, as well as the hiring firms, Carney Sando, that are pumping these individuals into these schools. So we have private schools where you would think we have the best, the best folks coming in to teach these kids. And really, we have the best activist and progressive pushers of an agenda to come into the art classroom and math and science. And that's what they're coming in and doing. So there's now there's not even a worry of, oh, are they going to, teach these kids the best math, art? No, it's will they push this agenda, and how many ways and angles can we get it pumped in, whether it's a video in Spanish or it's a comment a teacher makes. I mean, we are dealing with Westminster in Atlanta, which is a $240 million endowed private school that cannot pump enough of this out. So it is, for sure, it's a cartel that is pumping all of this through the private school. And then you have those that aren't, seeing it as much and aware of what's going on in the public schools, where it's like, oh, it's this flower language, DEI. This is about being nice. It's about being Christian. It's about being, good to each other. No, this is not what it's about. This is an agenda, a political agenda that's destroying education and society in itself.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting to note, I know Mario pointed out about the funding from McKinsey Scott. For those of you who don't know who that is, that's actually Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. And
Yes.
part of these, these funds, she's actually come out and publicly said, I believe it's $3.8 billion, worth of her money is going to be pumped into these projects that she supports, and Teaching Lab is very publicly listed as one of those. So for those of you that didn't know that, that's who McKinsey Scott is.
And I want to also just establish really quickly for the speakers that are on, feel free to chime in throughout the conversation as you see fit. Don't wait. You don't have to wait on Eric or I to call on you. We want to hear your thoughts on this story, and to feel free to keep the conversation going at any time. So whoever is up next and has some thoughts, please come on.
Absolutely. You guys did a great job in really showing, I'm sorry I didn't catch the last speaker's name, the lady that was speaking. They really put on this fake facade. I'm seeing it all the time in my reports here in Florida, is that these people are coming in. It's like, oh, it's this pretty picture of inclusiveness. Well, no, it's actually trying to make everyone, a certain class, feel oppressed and feel like the other class is oppressing them. And it's disgusting. And you spoke perfectly. I'm sorry. What was your name again?
So it's Kate Hudson with Education Veritas in Atlanta.
Perfect. And yeah, that's what we're seeing across the board. And Project Veritas,
Yes.
I always brag about you guys. You guys are doing a great job in making sure that getting these people undercover. It's really unprecedented work. Great job, guys.
Hey, thank you, Brendan.
It's not just about it's not just about dividing people into classes. It's about dividing society. It's about tearing down Western civilization. Let's be frank here. That's what their goal is, right? It's to upend the existing order and build something else. And we don't know what that something else looks like, but it's not good.
No.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think that from a national security standpoint, people need to really think, like, what is education truly intended for? And that's to drive our country forward on a national, global level, right? When you have countries like China, their schools are teaching advanced levels of math and science and trying to be the front runner in every single industry. And then here in America, we have these globalists, that are tied to whether it's Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, whatever, that are really funding these programs that are actually lowering our standards. They're actually making us dumber, if you will. It's not even just about dividing people. Even some of the math core curriculums that they're pushing is actually designed to make America lower on the overall national standing, right? Because we have been leading the way on a global scale in terms of our education systems. And this is truly, in my opinion, a war on our country. It's a war, and they're going after our young kids, and not even just in schools. But when you look at, I think it was Trump had brought up that TikTok, right? The algorithms, if you're watching TikTok in China, you're actually going to have more educational content shown to you versus if you're watching it in America, it's going to be this mind-numbingly dumb stuff that, triggers dopamine in the brain and essentially gets young kids addicted. So a lot of this stuff they're pushing through these labs, these scam labs, are designed to make us dumber as a country.
Well, and they're hijacking our education system. I mean, the whole purpose here
100%.
is to hijack our culture and our education system to make it go in a direction that frankly takes us lower. I mean, it's really just lowest common denominator, and actually not even that good. I mean, it's much lower
Right.
than that, inane stuff. And they've been doing this in our education system for a long time because it's ultimately a way for political control. When young children don't grow up and they're not able to do critical thinking, to master critical thinking skills and many of the basic skills that they need to be successful in life, then they're politically vulnerable and moldable
That's right.
into a certain shape. And that's really the ultimate goal here, I
If I
believe.
That's right. And within the private schools, and especially in Atlanta, we have dealt with this with so many that have so much impact, and they have fueled the entire agenda with high powered folks, and they've connected with Rockefeller Foundation and Johns Hopkins, and have been at the forefront of the data mining. And you have, a school that is, has been a top elite, quote, private Christian day school. And now it's everybody gets accommodations. Everybody can take the SAT. Everybody can, the APs. Everybody can, they dumb and water all of the curriculum down, and there is no critical thinking. It's here's the Democrat platform. This is what we're going to feed you, and you either like it or there'll be consequences. You'll get an F. You'll get pushback from the teacher. There's bullying involved. And so these kids are having to either align their thinking and their essays and their work with what the teacher thinks, because that's now made, very well known, or else you're out. Everyone knows you're the conservative, or your thinking isn't in line with ours. And it's just a bullying situation to get these kids to be little activists, fist pumpers, and roll along with the program.
So I have a question. Is there any funding for this this scam that's coming from taxpayer dollars at all? Because I see that a lot too. Is that these groups that put on this fake facade are getting public tax dollars in many instances?
Well, and we deal, this is something that, Kemp has not even really been aware of. And I think all of these people that are funding this and rolling along with the agenda, they're just not aware. They just don't get how entrenched this is and what actually this looks like. It's like, they say it's about being kind. This, prestigious institution is telling us this. And so they're trusting what's coming out of there. And I'm sure that there are so many things going sideways with the public school system, but as well, of course, the private school system groups, because there's that leeway. They have the ability to go and, pay millions to these, accreditation groups and hiring firms to bring in the type of individual they want, pushing the agenda for them. But I'm sure that that's going down as far as the public sector, because people just aren't aware.
Well, to further answer that question, I think that's one of the key questions that need to be answered. And this is R.C. Maxwell speaking, press secretary of Project Veritas. You've already heard that there is an investigation underway from the Georgia State School Superintendent's Office, where we will find out an answer to the question if Georgia's taxpayer dollars were used for these programs. Teaching Labs has issued a statement. We'll get to the statement a little more in depthly later, but one of the key points of their statement is Teaching Lab does not create or sell curriculum, which is a direct contradiction from the statements made by their own employee, which is about them selling curriculums. Now, they may not be selling curriculums in the traditional sense, as in the school is actually adopting a curriculum. But if you go to the Teaching Lab website, you can see priced at $960 per person, you can take a course with Teaching Labs about internalizing English and language education through K-8 models with a culturally responsive lens. Now, it doesn't take a genius to know what that means. You're taking things, English and language arts, that should be relatively objective, and you're making it subjective because you're saying you need to use a certain lens in order to analyze that. That is critical race theory, and that is not allowed under Georgia state law. and we can specifically dissect what the law talks about, but the law is pretty clear that in no Georgia classroom can a divisive concept be advanced. A divisive concept is anything that talks about one race being superior or inferior to another, anything about the United States being fundamentally racist, anything about someone's race indicating that they inherently have an oppressive or racist viewpoint against other races. And that is inherently implied, seemingly, by these curriculums, which you can pay $960 for. Now, the question is, these school districts, which Mr. Quentin Bostic on camera says that Teaching Labs is working with, these school districts, who is paying these funds? Are we to believe these teachers are paying $960? No, that is most likely coming out of some sort of fund, most likely a school credit card. But there's no need for me to hypothesize or for me to prognosticate what I think, because
you'll figure it out.
It'll be figured out.
Well, there are millions of dollars in this kind of curriculum. Don't underestimate. This is about when Georgia passed this law, it put a massive revenue stream from these left-wing book publishers. It took a revenue stream away from them. It's a combined, and they love the revenue stream because it allows them to advance their agenda. But when they lose the revenue stream, they lose both all at once. So this undermines what James O'Keefe and his undercover folks are finding out is the methodology that people in the radical Marxist left use to try to grab on to our education. We have a government monopoly in education right now, which also is a moral hazard for these sorts of things because there's no choice. Parents can't decide how they're going to, and I'm not saying we get rid of government schools per se, but this should be full choice. Parents should be able to decide what they do. As it is, the teachers' unions control these government-directed educational institutions to put this crap into kids' heads because there's also a political agenda that they're pressing. They make millions and tens and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they press this crap into kids, and it's horrible.
It's actually
the media promotion, right? You have, for instance, the New York Times. They made this 1619 project that they won a bunch of Pulitzers for, and that is, it's proven to be, completely bunk. It's nonsense. Even socialist history professors came out and said, no, this is a bunch of nonsense. It's rewriting what history actually is, and we don't support it because it's lies. But that didn't matter, right? It promoted an agenda, and it's this woke agenda that's being pushed through schools, through CRT and 1619 Project, the New York Times. They're center to this, right? I mean, this stuff is being taught to students from kindergarten age up until college.
I think it's important. No, I think it's important to focus on the actual curriculum, because it's not the problem is not so much it's not the selling like I said, it's kind of selling the curriculum to the schools, but in a way though, that's not the problem. It's the type of curriculum that they're pushing, because that's how people get their curriculums taught in schools. So they go to the school boards and they get the school board to accept or deny the curriculum that someone is trying to pitch.
The theory is that conservatives need to start pushing their own curriculums. We need to get behind the conservative moral version of the teaching lab and make sure we as parents are not putting our responsibility of what's taught to our children on school boards or government officials. Because at the end of the day, I can speak as a mom. It is my job and my job alone to parent and raise my child and to stay on top of these things. And I think that for so long, parents have sort of trusted in the education systems. But now that we're aware all this stuff is happening, there really is no excuse for any parent to sort of not pick up their own responsibility, not admit, I didn't know this was taking place. But we need to be firm and fierce in shutting this stuff down and making our voices heard. Otherwise, all that's going to happen, right, is this organization, they're going to, sever the ties, but the government's going to turn around and give a contract to basically the exact same organization by a different name. This was some of what he was saying in his in the Project Veritas video, right? He's saying, oh, we're going to push these curriculums, and every year we're just going to rename it and label Series 2, Series 3, and charge them a new fee, right? There's all of this disgusting, like profitability and corruption within the education institution. But if every parent actually took responsibility for their child's education, I honestly think we wouldn't be in this situation.
So you have to understand the system that we're talking about. And I'm so happy that Project Veritas has exposed this. But what every person in this space has to understand, it is in your state, it is in your school district. This is happening everywhere. And DEI is how it is recognized in the workforce. But what it is called in education, it is called social emotional learning. And social emotional learning, or SEL, has several tenets. They have the mental health counseling, which is a whole other issue I would love to expose, restorative justice practices, and culturally responsive teaching, which what this guy is selling to the schools is culturally responsive teaching. They bring in books that purposefully engage students to adopt a sociopolitical lens so that they are brainwashed into believing this ideology. CRT is the ideology, SEL is the delivery system, and we have to name it for what it is. And this guy is a small part of the big system. SEL has been in the education system starting in 2016. It was in over 90% of the public education system in America. And at this point, it is 100%. It is in private schools. It's extremely dangerous. Every single person that is in a state that actually bans CRT, your schools, including your state education department, pushing social emotional learning, is violating that ban. And we should have lawsuits across this country like they've never seen. It's just that people don't understand the delivery system, and it is social emotional learning. It sounds nice. They use very nice language, innocuous language that does not hit the radar of parents thinking it's bad, it's brainwashing, but it is. And the reason it is because they use skills that we all want our children to have, like self-awareness and responsible decision-making, but they deliver it to your children through what they call an equity lens. That's why he talks about, we just sell it under equity. Well, that means they deliver it through the lens of a critical race theorist. Culturally responsive teaching was coined by Gloria Ladson Billings, and she is a self-proclaimed critical race theorist who believes that our country is systemically racist. Why are they doing this? Because they're teaching our children that they have to believe in this ideology and that they need to dismantle the systems. If you are someone that believes in CRT, you believe every system in America is racist and oppressive and it needs dismantled. And that is what is happening in our education system. And I'm really thankful for this being exposed.
And I should mention here, just for everyone listening, I've known James for some years now. And I have to tell you, folks, if Project Veritas was not doing what they were doing, we would definitely not know about this stuff, or the likelihood is very, very slim. That's the amazing work that Project Veritas does, because they absolutely opened the door to show the rancid efforts of the radical left and of other organizations that are trying to take over this country. They're trying to influence so many things. And it's very important that you support, follow Project Veritas. You get that opportunity right around here as you look up at the Project Veritas logo there that Mario's behind. You need to follow Project Veritas, and you need to make sure that you let people know that they need to support this work, because it's critical. It's one of the few organizations that really gets that job done and makes you aware of things you need to know so that you can stop this stuff in its tracks.
Well, thank you.
Hey, Jen. Yeah, thank
you, Jim. You said a key word there, which is aware. And awareness, there's been lots of policy discussion so far here in this Twitter space so far, which is great. But people really have to be aware before we can get to any sort of action. We have some people with their hands up. I want to make sure we get to everyone. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this video highlights, yesterday's video was very insightful, but this one also highlights a very important two different pieces, and I'll start with the first one, is the tax law that basically helps shield places like the teaching lab from like transparency, right? And this is like something we talk about a lot. It's the similar protections that protect a place like Project Veritas are also being used to be weaponized against the everyday person through the education system. And this is one of the things that we really need to have real reforms over, is like public disclosure of activities by certain nonprofit organizations, particularly in the education level, particularly when they have to be doing deals and vending services to these municipalities, right? What the teaching lab is doing is very non-transparent, especially at the school district level. And this is one of the things that's very, very critical for people to understand. The anti-CRT laws, with Georgia probably being one of the best, if not the best in the country, it's still not enough when the people who would be watchdogs aren't actually able to see what those organizations, these nonprofits, these NGOs are actually doing when they're conducting business in the state of Georgia, right? You look at, there's only so many members of the State Board of Elections or Education, in the state of Georgia who are appointed by the governor. The governor's office is relatively small, and it's a legislative dominant state, right? So you have this like a lack of government oversight on this stuff that it needs to be forced to have some sort of a transparency and reporting requirements. And I'll let someone else chime in.
Real quick, I just wanted to say that for the past...
So I had a question for Jennifer and Heather, because you guys were talking about it a lot. So, hey, by the way, RC, you're the man. We haven't gotten to meet yet. I'm Brennan Leslie from Florida's Voice. You're doing a great job. I look forward to meeting you one day. But for Jennifer and Heather, you guys were talking about it. My problems I have when I'm reporting about this stuff in Florida is I'll be like, ESG, social emotional learning, and they'll be like, huh? What's that? SEL? DEI?
Yeah,
what?
training people to become Antifa, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's,
essentially.
Yeah.
But so my question is to you ladies, I think you're both mothers, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. What should parents and anyone that's in here that may have a child in their household, what should they be looking out for? What kind of wording and terminology in these and homework and assignments and stuff should they be looking out for that's like keywords for this stuff?
One thing they do is they send them surveys to children, and so if you have children in school, you have probably seen them, but they give them surveys at school as well, and they make it sound nice that they're just teaching empathy, building relationships, managing emotions. Those three phrases there are key to how they try to sell this. But again, they are doing it through this equity lens. So when they teach children at school empathy, they're teaching them to be empathetic towards all of the victims of America's systemic racism and oppression. But when it comes home and you might see a worksheet that talks about how do you practice empathy or building relationships, a lot of parents are not realizing how they're delivering it to the children, that you need to be empathetic towards this systemic racist society that we live in. Literally, social emotional learning this comes from CASEL. It's CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, and they talk about creating a new critical, and what they mean is critical pedagogy, critical race theory consciousness for the children. And they have redefined all of the words that we are used to using in a genuine way. And so but you're looking for words that do not seem like they should be a big deal, but they have redefined them and they deliver them to your children through the equity lens. And that's, again, exactly what he talked about in the video. He said, we do this under equity.
Yeah. So I'll say, I have a daughter, and as far as, what we can do about this sort of stuff, talk to your children, like have a conversation with your children, and it's your job as a parent to ultimately teach them and equip them with the tools so that when they do go to these schools, if there is a woke teacher trying to push this, you've already prepared them for that, and they're equipped with the knowledge to know that that's not true, or to know that that it's not right what these teachers are pushing. So it's your job to really instill the values in your children that you believe in. And so for me, my daughter will go to school and she will report back to me what her teachers are doing or saying, or if there's something that she knows in her heart is unjust or not right, she will come back and tell me. So the best thing you guys can do is talk to your children. Let them know right from wrong. This is our job as parents to teach our children right from wrong. It's not the school's job. And if you give the school the opportunity to do that, they will brainwash your child and try to turn them against you. So it's so important that you build actual relationships with your children. I know the world gets so busy sometimes, and we're working and we're doing things. It's so important, though, to sit down with your children, spend time with them, ask them questions, and really instill in them the values that you want, because if you don't, the world will.
If you want to do something about this, if you want to take action right now and you have children in the education system, get them out of the data collection, the social emotional learning surveys. Your children are being given surveys. They do not have to have your permission. They basically have to just let you know there might be a survey, and the surveys they use questions that seem very innocent. They use questions that talk about, we just want to check on the climate of the school. But what they're doing is they're collecting data on the children. They're using that data to drive this agenda. So they may ask your children in a survey that says, how often do you believe you belong at school? And your children, or that you fit in, or however they want to word it. And your children are answering it. But the way that they interpret the data is through the equity lens. So they interpret it as if you believe in critical race theory. And then they come back and say, well, we have, a certain percentage of children that feel like they don't belong. So we better bring in more DEI training or more culturally responsive books, such as what this guy is trying to sell. Get your children out of the survey. If you want to do one thing, you tell the school, and you have the right to do it, but you have to do it. Opt your children out of all surveys. They're collecting this data, and then they use this data against us to push this agenda. It is driving this. So
it's not just that. I mean, they use the surveys to target specific children. They see that those children are particularly vulnerable.
That's right.
Yeah, right. And they use the Gay Sexuality Alliance, the Gender Sexuality Alliance, used to be called the Gay Straight Alliance clubs, to facilitate all of this. So, you'll have teachers and you'll have what are essentially snitches, right? Other students who will try to befriend these kids who are, a little bit ostracized, a little bit out of sorts, like kids with autism, mild autism, the kids that just don't fit in. They're the ones who are particularly vulnerable to becoming evangelized with this stuff, or indoctrinated, if you will, into becoming evangelists themselves.
I just wanted to jump in if I could. I'm a teacher who left my school, a very woke school, in a public way, and this is somebody who's seen his colleagues do exactly what Jennifer was talking about, and Heather as well. It's essentially a kind of moral intimidation that they're using on children. They use it on adults. So if adults have trouble standing up to it in their workplace, how is a child supposed to stand up against it? And it's essentially like a three-step process in kindergarten. They start by celebrating the importance of skin color as a marker of identity and gender, and then they explain gradually that these identity markers socially define you as privileged or not, and that society is set up in a hierarchical way. And then what they do is that creates the sense of injustice that all children have, the sense of justice and fairness, and so they ride that platform to set them up to be activists. And so there are, in the private school that I was teaching at, the National Association of Independent Schools, they use several of these consultants that push this from the earliest years, even junior kindergarten. And so if you look up the Pollyanna, is an organization that has a racial literacy curriculum starting in kindergarten. I urge you to look that up. It's all available for free, so you can see how they do it. But it's all around weaponizing the empathy of children
and creating a victim class, right? Like a victim mindset. It's like the opposite of empowering. It's creating the next generation of leaders are going to have this victim mentality, essentially.
Social emotional learning is in their documentation is meant to influence your children to be the social agents of change for a new consciousness, for a new social order. It's literally in their documentation from Castle. And again, this is in all 50 states. If your children are in public schools, We're talking to you. This exposure is so important not because specifically because of this person or the map that shows all of the states that might be using the teaching lab. It doesn't matter if they're using teaching lab. They're using something like it. It is about culturally responsive teaching. It is about social emotional learning. And I know a lot of times it's hard for people to grasp because nobody wants to go up against something that claims to be helping the mental health of children, but they're really driving the deterioration of the mental health of children because they are constantly pushing this idea that we live in a systemically racist and oppressive society, and you have to do something about it. That's why they call them the agents of social change.
I think you made a good point when you mentioned it's very difficult to create any sort of consensus against these methods of teaching when they do sound so universal. And I think we can look to the statement from Teaching Lab themselves as kind of a good case study and to the mindset of how these people operate and kind of also the vacuous nature in which they can kind of make claims and operate in a world of immaterial reality. So if you look at the statement that Teaching Lab issued after Project Veritas' investigation into their practices, they said Teaching Labs is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that supports teachers with research-backed professional learning. What does that mean? Research-backed professional learning that helps them.
It means they surveyed themselves and they agreed with it. That's what it means. There's nothing backing it.
That helps them improve outcomes for students. I mean, learning it automatically helps outcomes for students. The first sentence in and of itself reads very much as someone trying to justify their existence and someone trying to use a lot of words to say nothing. They say that their goal is to partner with teachers and students in the shared pursuit of educational equity. There's that key word, equity. So they can thrive together in communities that enable students to be lifelong learners and lead meaningful lives.
I'd like to, if I could just very quickly challenge everyone to look into these statistics. CASEL, which this is where it's coming from, this is exactly what they follow. With the social emotional learning, they claim that social emotional learning was going to increase academic achievement and the mental health of the children. And if you go back to 2013, 2014 and see what your academic proficiency levels were, including the mental health statistics, whatever you can find, and then pull it from 2019. If you do it from today, they'll just blame it on COVID, of course. So just go up to 2019, and I can tell you that it has declined in between those years. And that is when social emotional learning came into the school. What they claim is a lie. It's not true. And they just keep running circles around people. And we have to call it what it is. And it is social emotional learning has to get out of the schools. It's undermining parents, and it is hurting our children significantly.
Well, and let's just be honest here. Social emotional approaches to learning. I mean, obviously kids need to develop and learn how to navigate life. But let's just be honest here. Kids need to know reading, writing, and arithmetic, and then they need to know how to apply that in practical ways. We have reduced the opportunities for children for some years now to be able to get those practical skills because we're throwing them off into areas of education that is not helping them at all, and is obviously doing promoting a political agenda. But we also
should be the
saw,
job of parents, right, to do the social emotional learning. It should not be the job of teachers to do social emotional learning. If I go to gym class, the last thing I want is a lesson on CRT. If I go to math class, I want to learn my arithmetic, my division tables, stuff like that. I don't want a teacher telling me about, anything that's nothing to do with the lesson that I'm there for. I mean, if I go to college and I learn, I don't know, say engineering, I don't want to learn about gender. I take a gender studies class, and that's why they exist. I mean, that's an option for students in college. But Why is this stuff in, and that's a complete different, it's not a complete different topic, but, I would argue that they shouldn't even be in colleges. But this is grade school that they're teaching this stuff to. And what is the purpose of this besides to indoctrinate kids?
You're correct.
Exactly.
You're
Even
correct.
even all the way
And for
as young
more
as
than a
kindergarten.
decade, we've seen, and for more than a decade, we've been seeing SAT scores and ACT scores go down. We've seen adjustments to those tests to try to make up for the shortfall. It's obvious that what they're doing isn't working, and they have in recent years been doubling down on this CRT crap. It's not helping kids at all. It's not, and it's harming what parents try to do in their homes, responsible parents, and it just makes everything worse.
Yeah, and I'll say that with Project Veritas keeps putting this information out there. The big question is, what are we going to do with it, right? Because if the left or these woke groups are so organized that they're able to pull this off, this is where we need to step up and stop being on defense all the time, defending ourselves against CRT and all this other stuff. We need to go on the offense. We need to create our own curriculums, our own groups. We need to push them in the schools. One of the things that I point out is a lot of these public schools, they have these after school programs for LGBTQ students, right? Well, there's no reason that every local church can't do an after school Bible study because it's the same concept, right? So petition and exercise your rights. If they're allowed to do an LGBTQ after school course, then we should use this as a chance to minister to kids too, bring God back into schools, because that LGBTQ crap is a lifestyle choice, just like my religion is. So if they're allowed to teach it to these kids at public schools, we should be allowed to teach Bible study too, right? So we need to go on the offense and we need to beat them at their own game. But right now it's like, we have all of these things. I would love to know if any of these speakers have any recommendations as far as like success stories. Where is there a school that has a great curriculum? How can we take that model and push it into all of these other schools and out the garbage that's infiltrating them?
We have to get rid of this, and I'll stop after this. I've talked enough, but I just want for anybody that tries to push back on this to understand what they will do is say, but we have these children that have these needs. And it is so important to understand that before social emotional learning, we already had supports for everything that most good people want children to have supports for in education. We had supports for children that had academic needs, emotional needs, behavioral needs. We already had all of that. But what we did not do was universally treat children on the basis of systemic racism and oppression. Thank you for letting me talk.
Yeah, of course. I want to get Tiffany on. I know Tiffany has been waiting a little bit to talk. So, Tiffany, you have the floor.
Thanks. And what Jennifer has shared is spot on. I mean, that is what we're seeing in the schools. Social emotional learning, the idea that every child needs to feel safe and valued in order to learn in the classroom, is really difficult to fight against. There's no doubt that the language and everything about it is hypnotizing. It's yes, of course you want every child. Like I challenge anyone. I sat on a school board and there was a shooting on February 14th at a school in Parkland, Florida, and 17 people died. And we had all of these consultants, like they're like parasites. They just come in and they want to sell you. And so the legislature was in session and there was money being put into mental health supports. And all of these consultants and strategic plan consultants swooped in with all of this information. And these districts were just ripe with money to spend. And so you wonder why Florida is where they are right now. There was so much pressure to put in, supports for all of these kids. The one thing we haven't talked about is restorative justice. There's like a million things we could talk about, but restorative justice is a practice where there's a lot of kumbaya, but not a lot of consequences. If I broke it down really fast. So these kids are in a really toxic environment in school. I think what Jennifer shared was really important. And academic achievement, as social emotional learning promised, is not happening. And all of this, again, the SEL, the CRT, the DEI, it's all an excuse for educational failure. And so, you'll see me fight against the unions a lot. They are just awful, toxic. They are all about supporting the system and feeding off the system. And it's not about the kids. And if you doubt what I'm saying, go look at their agenda for all of their summer agenda this past year. But, I'm just thankful that people like you guys at Project Veritas and other smart people who have been really concerned about other areas of our world and our lives are taking such a passionate interest in our children and their education. And we need you so badly.
Thank you, Tiffany, for that. I do actually want to bring up a topic that was discussed yesterday, but I think we have more information tonight where we can bring this back for discussion. There was some, I wouldn't say disagreement, but some debate last night as to whether there would be accountability for this individual, Quentin Bostic. Some said, nothing will happen to him. They'll hide him. They'll pretend he doesn't exist, but he'll get away and do things, get to do the things that he wants to do eventually. Some think that, he might get fired. And the reason I think it's a relevant conversation tonight is given what RC talked about in the teaching lab response, where they obviously dismiss Project Veritas and attack us. But at the same time, you can notice a little bit where they are kind of trying to distance themselves from Quentin. And then tonight, you have the scam. The man says that he calls his own employer a scam lab. So my question here is, do you think that because of, the fact that they're already seeming to distance themselves from the man last night, plus calling the organization a scam lab tonight, will there be actual something will happen here or not?
And I'll just piggyback on that.
I think that's
a little bit, Mario. It not just has the teaching lab responded. I know RC mentioned a little bit. The Georgia Department of Education has responded. Their office said, we are in communication with both the school districts explicitly mentioned to verify whether the information in the video was accurate. And we are working to ensure that these materials have not been adopted in other districts. We will direct any district using these materials to discontinue their use. So to this whole idea of, accountability, which we all seek, clearly, the Georgia Department of Education, this first video went out, roughly 24 hours ago. And here we are tonight with these statements in hand. So, I think that some accountability is going to be had.
And this is really communications 101. I mean, we've seen this a number of times at Project Veritas where you'll see a part one get released and you'll see the bad guy really be in a rush to cover his bases. CYA, if you know what that means, will issue a statement dismissing Project Veritas, maybe standing by their employee in an act of unity. And then Project Veritas releases part two. And in this instance, I think this was a critical error on behalf of Teaching Lab to make this statement. I mean, look, we talk with these schools. We let them know what we're publishing. We seek comment. Sometimes these schools are wise enough to actually engage us. They'll give us an answer. They'll ask us questions, such as, what else do you have? In this instance, that did not happen. And now you have a situation where Teaching Labs has already said about their employee, the views expressed by the employee are their own, that the employee was recorded without their knowledge or consent. As you see, they're not making any defense on the claims made by their employee. They're not saying our employee was caught in a moment off guard where he said something that wasn't true. No, they're simply saying it was his own words. If your employee is saying that you're a scam artist, I think that might be something that you might want to respond to with a little bit more levity. So we will see if Teaching Labs will update their statement. And if they do, I think it'll be very telling.
Because I was one of the people yesterday who said he wouldn't face any punishment, and I think that's still mostly true. I think he has definitely burnt some bridges with his comments on Teaching Labs, but I think he even stated in the original part one video that the worst he would get is sacked, and that will be the extent of the backlash that he faces. I don't think he will face too much criticism or heat for actually divulging how they're spreading what is basically praxis in the school systems. I don't think they'll speak to that as much.
Hey, Eric, I have a question. I have a quick question. Do you think that, have you heard about the CDC's framework it's called Whole School, Whole Community, Whole Child?
I have not.
Okay, so it's a framework that was implemented. Glenn Beck did a long special on this, and it's basically they're talking about adverse childhood experiences and how the education system took on a more prominent role in the lives of children and in the community when the CDC released this framework. And one of the main tenets of it is social and emotional climate. So you may want to look into that.
Yeah, that's definitely something we can take our eyes.
Hey,
on.
Eric. If you get someone that's a listener in your space, her name is Kelly Ski. She is a researcher who knows a lot about what's called WISC, the whole school, whole child, whole community model. And it's how the federal government undermines local control in the public education system. And it's really, really dangerous.
Absolutely, Kelly. If you're if you're in here and listening, send a request and we can try to get you in.
I'll add too, as far as like this guy being held accountable, I think if he alone is not held accountable and the teaching lab is not held accountable, then this is what's going to create the incentive for them to keep doing what they're doing. So really the responsibility is on the parents that when people like this are outed, you need to get so angry and so fierce, because really what this entire story is about, it is about evil people manipulating the minds of our children, the absolute most vulnerable among us. And this is sick. This is sadistic. What these people are doing is not in our child's best interest. And it's the exact opposite. And so when this kind of stuff happens, every single parent in Georgia right now should be irate. They should be calling and demanding investigations to this and being so fierce that people are terrified to ever be outed for this kind of crap again. We need to really hold the line as parents. And this is part of the problem, is we haven't held that line. And I think to RC's point, there's a lot of people that have been unaware. But the more Project Veritas and other networks and journalists like myself keep exposing these things, it's awakening a sleeping giant. And we really need to call these people what they are. They're sadistic people that are preying on the minds of our innocent children.
Yeah, I really hate to break it to you guys. I think many of you know this, but the majority of Americans think critical race theory is simply teaching slavery, which we know is a gross mischaracterization of what the discipline actually is. But a majority of Americans, and this is by design, this is why this teaching lab statement I just read is gobbledygook. This is entrenched. This is part of their defense. This is how they hide. They're based on confusion, right? So a lot of Americans think critical race theory is simply teaching slavery. Brandon.
Hey, so Tiffany is a part of an awesome organization. She didn't get is Moms for Liberty, and they really emerged in the last couple of years. And I think she's the perfect person to answer this question. Tiffany, what like we've talked about it a few times in this space tonight, is that this stuff has been going on for a long time, right beneath our noses, and we just haven't realized. What was the moment that kind of kickstarted and brought Moms for Liberty to the forefront and really started exposing all this stuff?
When I ran for school board, I have 4 kids, and then I saw like how the education system worked. And the first wake up call was how much power the unions had. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, why? No one's bargaining for the parents. The district bargains for the district, the union bargains for the union, and really the people at the table, not the teachers in the classroom. They have no idea. And so that really woke me up. But I think Moms for Liberty was really born out of when parents came out during COVID and they were so concerned about their kids, like learning and their health and the masks and the quarantines and their mental health and school being closed. And we were called domestic terrorists. I mean, honestly, we were, shut down. They shut down citizen input. They stopped listening to parents. I was on a board where they did it. And it just was like, oh my gosh, our whole system is broken because no one's listening to the parents. And they're no one loves kids more than the parents. They're concerned. And that was really it. Tina and I just looked at each other and said, we've got to do something. We've got to build an army because, individually, these districts are picking off the parents one by one. They're retaliating against them. It was awful. I mean, you have Paul Rossi. He's such a champion. He's been such a fighter since the beginning of all of this, standing up for students. And And, parents are doing that all over the country. And so somebody said something about anonymity the other night when we were talking. I never touched on it. But one of the things that's really important in this fight for our country right now is you cannot be anonymous anymore.
Yeah, and Heather was talking about how the federal government is kind of like undermining our local education. We saw it right front and center when Moms for Liberty, you guys were being called domestic terrorists by literally the DOJ. It was
I mean, if you mess with my daughter, I'm going to make a terrorist seem like the most humane person on the planet. Like, let's just put it simple. You mess with our kids and we're going to come for you. I don't care if you're the Department of Justice or whoever you are. You don't mess with our kids. And this is the line that we need to hold. Call me a domestic terrorist all you want. Don't mess with my kid.
I think so much of the problem has to do with this issue of moral authority, and the state has arrogated into itself the moral authority that it thinks it knows what's best. The state treats the public school parents the way the administration of private schools treats private school parents in a lot of ways, as they're both wokeified. I mean, this stuff has infiltrated so many schools, public and private, that until we're able to stand up to it and sort of have come over the top. It's almost like poker. Like if you just call or fold, you're never going to win. You have to go hard. You have to go over the top and double down on your own moral intuitions. We have to make the case that civic virtue and liberty, these aren't political preferences. These are moral issues. America, for its flaws, for what it's failed to live up to, yes, but our principles and our ideals are morally correct, and what they're trying to do is immoral. And until you have that frame that's guiding you and guiding your voice, it's going to be very difficult. You're going to be on your heels all the time.
I want to interject one thing to Heather's point. On parents really standing up and taking action when it comes to their kids. The Georgia Department of Education, this is specifically in Georgia, but you can read their full statement. We posted it on our Twitter page and all of our social medias. But they say, in addition to the efforts, parents should be aware that HB 1084, the Protect Students First Act, establishes a complaint resolution process that parents, students, educators, or personnel can follow up and report a violation. They further go on to say that they encourage parents to follow up with this process and to report these violations of the Protect Students First Act. So to your point, Heather, it really is on the parents who are noticing these things, in the readings that they're getting, sent home with, and, in their assignments, all these little things that they're seeing, it's on the parents to start reporting these things, because the government seems to say that they want to hold these people accountable.
The problem is there's no real accountability. Just to be clear, there's never any, it's like the fox watching the hen house. There's never any real accountability. I just want to put that out there. And that's what we have to change. There has to be a private right of action in all of these new policies that are coming forward and bills that are being passed. The Pupil Protection Rights Act needs to have a private right of action, because right now we're asking public schools to police themselves, and they can't do that. The system protects the system. It does not protect the kids.
I mean, if there's some places in the United States right now, right? Like I think in California or someplace where they're actually trying to make it so that you can, all sorts of stuff, like hormone blockers can be given to your child without parental consent. Like they're completely trying to come between the parent and the child. These are predators that are running the institutions. They're not educators with an ideology. They're evil, sick, twisted people that are trying to separate parents from their children. And so it might not be as bad in your state, but if we look at what's going on in other parts of America right now, like CRT looks like nothing compared to these kids that are going and getting doing irreversible damage to their bodies. I know there's been so many schools these days are pushing the LGBTQ agenda, right? And nobody wants to be labeled, a bigot or transphobic or a domestic terrorist. But I mean, when you have the truth on your side, who cares what they call you, right? There's so many kids out there that, go through these transitions. There's some that are speaking out now through an organization called Changed, which is former LGBTQ people that have now retransitioned back to, their biological sex or whatever, but more and more people are speaking out that have gone through this stuff. This is life-changing, demonic, disgusting stuff, and they're putting it in classrooms with elementary school kids. Like they're
But
teaching kids
Heather, I
they
think
can change.
it's important to remember. I really do, because I worked in the system. There are some ideologues. There is no doubt. I mean, libs of TikTok has showed us that. But there are also a lot of people that are caught up in this that are just nice people who think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think.
I think that's a key point.
Ignorance. No, I do. I think we should be educating people, and I'm sure there are plenty of people in the schools that think it's not a big deal to push some of this stuff, but at the end of the day, you got to hold the line, right? It's not an excuse to allow them to put this. Like, this is either we hold the line or we don't. Either they can step up and they're going to end up like that girl who's going around on social media who had like her breast removed and these hormone blockers, and now she's having all of these issues. You can't undo that, and they're pushing it and they're blurring that line. And, honestly, like, ignorance is not an excuse for me at this point in time. I'd rather offend the nice person and protect the kid and be whatever name that they're going to tell me than not say something and speak out and call it what it is. It's disgusting. It's sick. It has no place in schools. None of the LGBTQ garbage belongs in our schools. If you don't want me going into the public school system and teaching your child to read the Bible and to pray and to wait until marriage, then you don't go in there and teach my child that she needs to be gay or trans or whatever the hell else.
That's a really, really good point, and I wish more parents would stand up for their beliefs when they send their kids to school. I think every parent has the fundamental right to direct the upbringing of their child, their education, their moral and religious upbringing, their medical care. And I think if more parents stood in defense of their beliefs and went into school with that expectation, we would be in a much different place in this country.
Amen.
I want to add to that. One of the big parts of the puzzle is the degree programs at the ed schools. So you can have school choice, you can have legislation, you can have policies, you can expose all this stuff, but the hiring pool, who are the young people for the past 20 years, 30 years, 40 years that have been going into education? These programs breed and mint new zealots. That's what they do. They're to actually understand what they're teaching. You have to read Free Air. You have to read, Giroux. You have to read these people that they're pushing on the teachers and they're coming out minted as new activists, looking to mint new activists. So until and I wish to God that more young conservatives would choose teaching as a line of work, because it's noble work, it's great work, it's incredibly fulfilling work. But you have to build that. And it's going to take decades to build up that that cohort.
And Paul, I really liked what you said earlier about this morality versus immorality issue, right? There's a moral side of things and there's an immoral thing, and you have to be able to distinguish this stuff. One thing that we found here in this investigation with Quentin Bostic is that, and I'm sure this doesn't surprise anybody, is that they don't believe that there is morality at all. It's not that they believe that they're immoral. They just believe that morality is relative. It's this moral relativism. Everything is relative, right? So how do you engage I don't know if you should engage these people in conversation, or how do you even engage in any way whatsoever with a person who believes that everything is relative, right? How do you have sort of dialogue?
I would challenge it a little bit. They believe that everything is relative when they're undermining your morality, but they do have a morality of their own. They just won't admit it.
That's a good point.
They do that when they deconstruct you, but they're just hiding the ball. So there is a system of justice and right and wrong, which is all based around group rights and about basically it's revenge. It's a revenge narrative.
Yep.
So that's my thinking on it.
Gotcha. I want to get Lisa on. I know Lisa's been waiting to chat a little bit. So Lisa, please chime in.
Well, hi everyone. Thanks so much for letting me speak. So I think the real problem here is that there is no local control. And part of it is I'm a mother who actually started researching social emotional learning because I realized that they were using that program to drag critical race theory and comprehensive sexuality education under the umbrella of mental health into my child's school. And so I don't think there's going to be any accountability for Bostic. What they did when I exposed this with another mother is they just eventually voted that program out. But, they swallowed the money they spent on the second step curriculum. And, the second step people were so brazen about it, it was very hard to get it out of other districts in my state. Many districts still adopt that program, which is actually one of the most widely used in the nation. So I don't think there's going to be an accountability, but I think we need to keep our eye on the ball here, which is really that we have lost complete local control of our education system. Using Chromebooks during the pandemic was needed, right? Because our kids needed to communicate with their teachers, and then they just kept them around. And these digital curriculums are all by third-party vendors. They can change them at any time, as I know is second step. They can add things whenever they want. And that curriculum's never approved by your school district or never gets seen by a committee of parents. So I think that we really need to talk about how do we return local control to our school districts, and so that the parents can have really the say when it comes to the education of their children.
Win back school board seats one by one.
And I would say, too, create a local group in your own community, in your own school system, like a coalition of moms. Because obviously, no one person has the opportunity to read every book in the library, but create, groups, have, weekly Twitter spaces with you and, all the other moms or something, and start banding together. And if one of you sees something, say something, and stick together and pushing back against it. I don't know if you know, Tiffany, but I brought this up on yesterday's Twitter space. There's an app called Sora app. It's an online student subscription library. And a mom here in my state started doing some digging because one of her sons, through accessing this online library that the school partnered with, had access to books with pornographic content. And then so she brought it up to the school, and then started further digging and researching some of the books in this app. And she found some that I swear to God literally contained links to dating apps and sex apps. It's absolutely disgusting. And I'm working on doing a story on this right now, actually. So the timing with this Project Veritas stuff is crazy. But it's called the Sora app, Sora. So I highly encourage anybody to look, if their kid uses a Chromebook or any sort of online thing, see if their school district partners with something called the Sora app, or even if it has any online library. These libraries, one of the big questions parents should be asking is, how does a book make it into that library? What's the vetting process? And who's doing the vetting?
So, Heather,
right?
I'll just tell you, I know you said moms should get together. That's why we did Moms for Liberty, because we knew moms needed to get together. So I'm not I try not to talk about it all the time because it's not a sales pitch, but it is working. We've got 266 chapters in 44 states with over 110,000 members. So it is working because there is strength in numbers.
That is amazing.
You're right,
Thank you so much
about the library books. I mean, Florida just passed a bill, HB 1467. It's a bill that people can look at that required for there to be rulemaking around how the books get in the libraries. We have a self-proclaimed Marxist running the American Library Association. You have Dan Klein in here who runs, I'm trying to think of what his Twitter space is, but if Dan's here, you should let him up as a speaker and he'll talk. He knows a lot more than me. But the libraries, these librarians think they're messianic. They think they're the savior of the schools. It's crazy.
Yes, and Project Veritas has put me in a litany of school board meetings, and from what I've seen in random places, not making news, there's all sorts of discussions about what's going on in these libraries. What's happening is the American Library Association, they have their own catalog of what they call banned books, banned and challenged books, and what will happen is these schools, innocently enough, they want to get the banned books because traditionally banned books are thought-provoking and have a lot of critical thinking, and generally they interrogate institutions. So they sign up for these banned books, and many of these books have the pornographic materials that has been discussed. And parents all across the country, believe it or not, they're asking questions about this. And what I've noticed, and what was shocking to me, walking into one of these school board meetings for the first time, is these are very adversarial meetings. These aren't the school board meetings my parents used to go to, that I used to go to when I was a kid. The moment you walk in, you hear about the moderator and how much time you're allowed to speak. You're told about the rules of decorum. You're threatened before you even speak that if you get out of line, here's the system and we will have an officer remove you. These school board meetings that are supposed to be collaborative environments are very, very combative. I want to get to some of these people with their hands raised. David Johnson and then Bree.
Hey, thanks for giving me a turn to speak. I just wanted to build off of what Heather was saying earlier, that I think a lot of parents just don't know what to look for. And I think beyond diversity, equity, and inclusion, then one of the biggest key terms to look out for has to be consciousness, because critical consciousness was also brought up in the Hasbro training that I was in. But I just had it. Privilege is probably the biggest unifying factor, because privilege exists between critical race theory and queer theory. And as bad as critical race theory is, queer theory is probably worse, because the end goal of it is to sterilize children.
Yeah, no, I hear that, David. I do see Bree just joined. She wants to chime in. So Bree, you have the floor.
A very early good morning from Rome, Italy. My name is Bree Dale. I am with the Epoch Times. Daily Wire now. There you go. So wanted to ask two questions really. First off, I remember now I'm a late Gen Xer, kind of on that cusp. I recall when I was in junior high, my parents attended a school board meeting and actually removed me from public school because of inappropriate material pornographic material found in a library and actually read by one of my teachers. So I wonder, sharing this personal story, if any of you can recall a time back in your development that similar situations were taking place. Is this systematic? Is this connected to, say, like Frankfurt School mentality of infiltration and indoctrination? Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I'm also working on a similar story connected to the Vatican right now, not on education, but on narrative forming. Thanks.
I can answer that question. This is absolutely systematic. This has been being planned since the 90s, and critical race theory itself originates back from the Frankfurt School. So this is something that's been going through a long march through all of our institutions. So 100%, this is something that's being planned out from the highest level down. Even our current administration supports critical race theory, queer theory, and all of that in the education department. So absolutely.
Yeah, when you look at the financing that's coming in, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, you've got, Jeff
hundreds of
Bezos'
millions.
ex-wife. This is clearly a well thought out, financed, driven agenda. And it's disgusting, honestly. And I truly believe that the motive behind it is truly sinister and evil. It's not just, the people actually pushing it, they're not the ones that think it's just teaching, CRT is just teaching racism. They know what it's doing. They know the effect it's having on the children. They know the effects of the LGBTQ stuff they're pushing when they're, gaslighting children into thinking, there's something they're not, or pushing incorrect grammar on them, like making them think that they can change their pronouns. Like all of this stuff, the people pushing it, they know the negative consequences and toll this is going to take on our children. So there may be good people within the education system that, are ignorant, or parents out there that are ignorant and just think CRT is teaching, anti-racism and all things nice. But there are very evil people financing and pushing this agenda from the top.
Definitely. One thing I want to...
if I may.
Sorry, no, please.
Yeah, so that what Heather just said is completely true. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for example, pledged $300 million to Common Core, and then $1.7 billion to social emotional learning. And so these people know what they're doing, and they're doing it on purpose. The people at the top do understand this. Just as kind of tangentially, since we were talking about it, the library thing is because it allows you to circumvent. They can say that it's a First Amendment academic freedom issue in a library when they cannot say that in a classroom because of curriculum and state actors. So they're using the libraries as the Trojan horse to get this material in to create what are called generative themes. In the critical pedagogy literature. The goal is to get the child to think about the issue, then bring it up in class. Then the teacher has a license to talk about it. So if it's in a library book and they get encouraged maybe to pick it up in the library is just making something on offer. It's not pushing it to the students. But what kind of summarizes, and when I asked to be a speaker, I requested speakership when I heard you guys say that their morality is relative and how do you talk to them? And this is, yeah, kinda. But no, it's false. Their morality is absolutely extremely absolute. Their morality is positional. If you have the consciousness, then what you do is moral and right. And if you don't have the consciousness, then what you do is immoral and wrong. To have the consciousness, though, means that you've joined the cult. So what you end up with is the kind of top people pushing it that Heather are talking about. They are in the cult. They're in the inner circle of the cult. They understand the cult. They're pressing the cult. Around them, you have kind of very dedicated people. Maybe this character you guys busted is in the kind of what you would call inner school, which is not the inner circle. It's not the leadership. Maybe he's leadership. I don't know. But those people understand the cult doctrine. And then you have an outer school. And those are people who have picked it up. And they follow the morality. They think it's what it means to be a good person. And that morality, when I say it's positional, it means what is your position in society and what is your consciousness of your position in society. It's not enough to be black for it to count under CRT that you're special, because if you're Larry Elder, you're the black face of white supremacy. You have to speak from a position of being conscious of what it means to be black according to systemic racism and CRT's definitions. Well, the outer school people are people who have picked up the lingo but have no idea what the cult's pushing or why it's pushing it. And most of your so-called good people think and have been kind of dragged into believing that this is what it means to be a good person. So the question was, how do we talk to these people? How do you deal with them when morality is relative? Stop thinking about morality being relative. Start thinking of these people having joined a cult. And they have a cult that has a very specific morality. It may or may not end in drinking Kool-Aid. And you have to kind of literally think almost in terms of cult deprogramming. It's more like, how do you get them to see the crack in the matrix where all of a sudden the cognitive dissonance is so big that they ask a question, then they start falling down the holy crap, I've been lied to red pill tunnel until they come out the bottom and we can start talking to them. And so it's a mentality that has to kind of change. This whole operation, critical race theory, queer theory is 20 times more dangerous than critical race theory. Critical race theory is mostly a setup for queer theory for a lot of kids. In the schools, also, of course, a hate America, Red Guard kind of thing like we saw with BLM in 2020. But it's mostly to push kids into adopting queer identities and wrecking their bodies and destroying their minds and ruining their families. So you have to start thinking in terms of these people being dragged into a cult. And it's an extraordinarily cult mindset. We can go real deep with that. That's another talk for another time. But how would you talk to somebody who's in a cult is the question, not how do you talk to somebody who's morally relative. And that answers these questions about if they're good people or bad people or whatever. They're people who have picked up the cult because they're going along to get along, or it feels right, or they've kind of picked it up, or they kind of buy into it, and their emotions have been manipulated. And the goal is to initiate your children into cults. I just want to make that last point. Queer theory explicitly from 91 or thereabouts, very early on, in explicit queer theory, was outlining that they see things in binary pairs. Of course, they hate binaries, so they have to talk about binaries. And the key binary they talk about with children is innocence versus what? Initiation. That's in their literature, quoted from, this is Eve Sedgwick I'm talking about specifically. So they think of children as coming to them being innocent to the world, and it's their job to initiate them into the proper understanding of the world. And once you get into that, the morality is absolute, it's savage, it's cruel, it's brutal, and it will break them down, and tear down their family structure, tear down their whole lives. So you have to think in terms of talking to cultists, which is a very different approach than thinking somebody thinks, oh yeah, because I think it's good. That's kind of moral relativism. So that's just a perspective shift, and knowing that the people at the top, Bill and Melinda Gates, know why they're dumping billions of dollars into this, and we have to remember that that's an important component of this.
Thank you, James. I'm going to reach out to you on a story I'm working on, like I said, on a Vatican connection to this. Thanks.
That was so well said. That's all I want to say, James.
Very, very, very well said. You're listening to James Lindsay, great author and a very well versed in postmodern theory. He's written a litany of books on the subject.
James, you should start a school.
I have a podcast.
But I feel like we need people like James to start being the ones that are heading and running these schools. I mean, it's like your breath of fresh air.
Pro bono, please.
That's right. So just to kind of move on a little bit, I will say, I know that RC alluded to it earlier. Project Veritas, we do this kind of, part one, part two, this drip campaign with some of these stories. So I guess a little Twitter Space exclusive. I mean, I can go out and say that we're not done with Quentin Bostic. Tomorrow, we will be putting out a video. James O'Keefe actually sat down with him in Georgia earlier this week, and I'll just say Quentin wanted to have a conversation. So that is coming tomorrow. You guys can expect that. I think that will give a lot more insight into Bostic's beliefs and, some of, exactly what we've been talking about tonight in terms of they believe this stuff and they want to disguise it. They're pretty okay with letting you know that that's what's happening. And, to say that he doubled down on his statements that he's made, on these undercover videos, might be an understatement. So the conversation that James and him had, it's pretty incredible. We're going to, I believe, release it in its entirety for the most part. So stay tuned for that. And, if anybody wants to, chime in on what they maybe think, about what this could be, let me know.
I also want to chime in about what James said regarding funding. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, almost its own NGO, funding lots of radical education and other sorts of projects around the world. But the United States government may be funding this. I mean, this story is talking about how perhaps, local counties are paying money to these entities to bring in CRT. You also have COVID grants, which is a little known secret now, that COVID money has been tied into third-party organizations who come into schools and offer them social emotional learning and equity inclusion. So, we can say what we want about the motives of some of these private entities, but the U.S. government paying, these entities money to come in and brainwash these students, very troubling. And just a fact check from earlier, we talked about kindergarten kids being a part of Teaching Labs operations. That is absolutely accurate. Teaching Labs, some of their labs priced at $816, you can do a deep dive into K through 12 skills and why it's important to provide a culturally responsive and sustaining education response to how they learn. We have Lisa.
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand how a lot of these programs are getting in. And it's not just, it is the COVID money, right? But it's because, for instance, we have accreditation agencies like Cognia. They'll come in and say, oh, we need to do an equity audit on your school district. And then they'll say, well, your outcomes are disparate. So that means you need to adopt a DEI or DEIB program, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And your teachers need to be trained. And, you need to fix the social emotional learning, the culturally responsive teaching you were just talking about. We also have strategic planners that come in, they do the same thing. And then they say, well, you have to adopt, a more diverse program and you have to have different perspectives. And I think that it's, it definitely is the money. It's the policies, like James mentioned yesterday, like the Every Student Succeeds Act. which says we have to collect data on some non-cognitive metric for students. It's all of these areas, and yes, they're funneling tons of money. It's the school districts adopting it. It's different vendors coming in and saying that they have to adopt these things.
To piggyback off of that, right here on the Teaching Labs website, you can go to the accreditation section, in which they will tell you about how participants can receive a certificate of participation, which can what? It can serve as a verification of attendance for state-approved requirements. So when the state says you must engage in some sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion training, they can go to Teaching Lab and they can pay them a boatload of money and they can get a certificate. And that is how the racket operates. And hopefully, Richard Woods, the Georgia superintendent, will get down to this. I can read a little bit of his statement. He says that he is firmly opposed to the inclusion of critical race theory and other divisive concepts in Georgia's public school, and attempts to push these are illegal, yada, yada, yada. Well, we've already talked about the lack of accountability metrics that exists currently. So it's going to be interesting to see how this happens. Are they going to track money? Are they going to track some of these cards? Are some of these Cobb County, if you don't know Georgia, Cobb County and Fulton County, I mean, those aren't necessarily the most conservative counties. So what level of transparency will these superintendents even offer? It definitely gets to a point to where I'm sure the Georgia superintendent's office are going to ask themselves, how many cages do we want to rattle in order to rectify this? We see this time and time again, unfortunately, at Project Veritas, where some kind of overarching entity will investigate something, issue a strong statement. However, they understand the system is more broken than they can fix. So it's not necessarily in their diligence to continue to go after the problem, because that only illustrates to everyone that there is a problem and that they've allowed the problem to persist. So
I see you have Kelly as a speaker. Kelly, the CDC is located in Atlanta in Georgia. This is no mistake. And the CDC has just declared a lot of things, including that racism is a public health crisis. And the Chicago Public Schools has it written into their equity framework, that this declaration by the CDC, and it guides what they do. So Kelly is the one to speak about CDC, how you talk about money getting into schools. Well, the CDC is one way that happens.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have, I guess it was mentioned earlier, they call it the WISC model. It's the whole school, whole community, whole child. And I will say James has an excellent podcast on Marxism and this idea of holism, or the holistic. And the CDC is endeavoring into the education sector to combine education and health for equity of each, which is a significant piece, because they want to make every school a community, or as they call it, a healthy school. And what does this look like? It's right on the CDC's website. It's a full service school that has a full health clinic. Your child's medical records are kept on campus. Doctors, telehealth, nurses, eye exams, every social service is right there. And so it's going to be presented really marketed well. But in actuality, they put these models into place. And what does health equity mean to the woke? Well, it includes down the line exactly their endeavor and what they're working towards. They want health equity, which to them means puberty blockers for kids and these surgeries and much more. Here in California, the Community School Initiative is already $3 billion of funding, but it's going to be pulling together local resources, state and federal. And we're not just talking about the Centers for Disease Control, but this initiative of safe, inclusive, and healthy schools goes back to the World Health Organization. It's a huge topic, and every American needs to know about it.
So actually, Kelly, based off what you said earlier, what Bree was talking about, and this is something I've been thinking about this specific topic that I'm about to discuss for as long as I've known myself. But, within the right, what I've learned is that there's, and I think it's a very good tendency, but there's this tendency that, if you're an American conservative, you should only care about what's happening in America. And if you're a French conservative, you should only worry about what's happening in France. But what we know about the left is that they don't think that way at all. As a matter of fact, they don't believe in nations, as we know that. And they work together and on an international level. I want to open up the conversation, and this applies to the education side too, because we see that indoctrination and, all these different racial and LGBT agendas are happening across the whole world. It's not just in the US. So how do people here, think about, obviously you want to focus on what's happening in the United States, but also shouldn't, is there a more effective way of combating this by uniting forces where different people think the same way as you do, but are not in the United States? I want to open up the floor to that conversation.
I mean, I think I think with CPAC right around the corner, I am pretty sure over the last couple of years, CPAC has actually expanded to CPAC Mexico, CPAC like Brazil, they're doing some stuff in other countries as well. And I think Turning Point USA is even sort of, is building relationships with people in other countries. I think it's really organizations like that, conservative organizations that branch out into these other countries. And like you said, Mario, that you team together and help fight this, because it really is a global issue. And if the left is teaming up, it's almost like the World Health Organization is the cult James was talking about, right? Like that's the epicenter. These globalists are the epicenter, and they're all together. But there's so many patriots. When you look at, these protests going on in Brazil and protests going on in Canada and protests going on all over the country, the freedom is a universal thing. Protecting children is a universal thing. Parental rights is a universal thing. The majority of people in this world are not in that cult. We're not a part of that cult. And if unified, that cult does not stand a chance. So I absolutely think on a global scale that we should have more international partnerships when it comes to fighting these issues. And I thought that's actually one thing President Trump did really well in office, is he really did align himself with other world leaders that thought like him, that pushed the same values that we all hold dear. So that's my 2 cents.
No, I was just going to jump in. I think, one of the things, since I've been at Project Veritas, speaking of this kind of, worldwide discussion, is, a lot of times we'll get videos sent to us, from other countries where people have actually subtitled them over, in French or in German or, Spanish. And one of the things on this idea of, partnering with, other entities around the world, getting this it's about the flow of information. So, that maybe that's one thing, we can do a little better. These videos, they do transcend into, other parts of the world, not just America. To Mario's point about that, everybody's fighting the same fight. So, the more that we can do that, I think that'll be good.
I think it's also important to note,
think...
I really challenge you to not think of this in terms of a right-left divide. And I know some of you are saying, ORC, come on. There's only one demographic politically who thinks that, for example, math is racist. And you may be correct. However, there are a large amount of educators, and I'm sure Paul knows many of these people, who do not agree with math being racist and who do not think that math needs to become more inclusive and less logical. And the only way I think we're going to actually achieve a consensus point in this country is when we let those leftists know it's okay. You can say that math is not racist, and that does not mean that you're MAGA. That doesn't make you MAGA to say math isn't racist. You can stop this insanity, and I think we should all just remember that.
I totally agree. I mean, I can say that even in my extremely woke school, Grace Church School, I had a lot of people approach me privately, and I totally underestimated the extent to which so much of the way people presented themselves in the social environment was performative. And they had, very different ideas. It would always be prefaced by, I wouldn't go as far as you, but, there's definitely qualms. There's definitely that crack opening. And you want to give people like that the chance, to go through that crack, to go through that thing and look around, because if what the other side is constantly pushing that if you don't align with this moral imperative, then you're like the January 6th insurrectionists, right? You're like these terrible people, and they've characterized it that way. So, you want to be the welcoming arms. You want to be the ear that you can just let them go through the process. It is like cult deprogramming in that regard.
Lisa, I think you wanted to chime in there a bit before, if you want to hop on.
Well, I was going to talk about the United Nations, and we're talking about reaching out to other nations and pushing back against this agenda. There are already groups like Family Watch International that are meeting with delegates from different countries and helping them to fight back against in United Nations agencies' agenda, because this is where a lot of this stuff is coming from. And so I think it's important for us to realize that the stuff we're seeing in the schools is really this push for a global education that has to do with a comprehensive sexuality education and other UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Absolutely. Also, I know Carolina hopped on and Dan Kleinman are on. If you guys wanted to, hop on the conversation, please feel free.
All right. This is Dan. I'm from Safe Libraries. I want to agree with R.C. Maxwell. He said about people have to realize that both sides oppose this stuff, not just one side. I know that in the case of the library stuff that I do, that the American Library Association knows that both sides oppose explicit books in public schools, but they frame it as just the conservatives and the crazy Christian prudes, because that kind of framing it as just one side scares off the other side and makes a lot of hay for them, when in reality, they know that everyone opposes this stuff. So R.C. Maxwell's idea was a great one, in my opinion, and I could prove it in the case of the American Library Association. And while I have you all here, just one more thing. That you're talking about all this stuff for exposing secret curriculums. Y'all have to remember, librarians are the silent ones that are pushing a lot of this stuff into the schools with their American Library Association book lists and their leaders. One of the leaders recently just said, or I reported on it, that they know this material is sexually inappropriate for children, but we're going to reframe it. That's her words. We're going to reframe it as diversity and inclusion. Okay, so when you have things like that book Genderqueer, which shows a boy giving to another boy or man, that's inclusive, you see. So therefore, you can't take it out of the school. There's so much more I can go on with these kinds of stuff has to do with school books. I just want you all to be aware that it's librarians, not just teachers, that are responsible for a lot of what's going on in schools. And they do it sneakily, too. That's their word, sneakily. Train each other to do things sneakily, precisely so parents don't know.
I've seen,
even in Texas, just one more thing. Even in Texas, they are just training librarians how to violate the FOIA laws in order to push these section-appropriate things on kids by using their personal emails and personal Wi-Fis to talk about how to do this so it doesn't become part of the public record and parents can't get them in FOIA requests.
And just so we understand what the landscape looks like, I have seen parents get laughed out of school board meetings for bringing up these books. I've seen other parents quickly, and librarians for that matter, quickly say, "You think kids are going to the school library for porn? Ah, ha, ha." And then all the progressive parents laugh, and the concern is not met with the serious attention it needs. This is what's happening in these school board meetings, and this is not what's being broadcasted by the corporate news. Only Project Veritas is showing you kind of what's going on. I believe Carolina had her hand raised.
Yeah, so I just want to revert back to the idea that we're fighting a battle of good and evil. So yes, I hear the whole left versus right. I mean, everybody understands I'm more of a, right, conservative. I like to just say that I'm pro-life, pro-God, pro-family, pro-America.
most important is I'm a constitutionalist. So with that being said, what these guys are doing is not only illegal but also evil. And so I want to put the responsibility back on the parenting, because I understand that some parents have to go to work and they have to leave it to the system. But unfortunately, if we don't reel it back to parental support and having parents go to the school boards and kind of be hovering over this entire group of infiltrators. I mean, we know who's behind a lot of this, and it's immoral people that are trying to hijack our country. They're trying to hijack, the foundation, what this country was based on, which is, godly, godly and constitutional rights. So they're trying to remove all of that from the school, and they've already have. So I want to invite all the parents to just put those little small things back into schools. How many parents are actually reading the curriculums? How many parents are actually taking the time, to say, well, look, I'm putting my children into this system. Let me at least find out what they're being taught. I want to say there was some kind of education website that my kids had to log in, math something Excel or whatever it was. And I actually went in and I walked my kids through when the school switched to that. And I was very, very pissed off to see the way that they were luring people. Now with the artificial intelligence, just recently doing the chat, the AI that they just did, my son, started using it for their English class. And I just found out that if you asked any conservative values or what is about the conservative, it is definitely oriented to manipulate the narrative. So all of the technology we have is completely against godly narratives. So put God back into the schools. And if you don't want to fight the system, then pull your kids out of that system, pull your kids out of the school. I did a combination of homeschooling and schooling because I found a very, very good school for my children. And a lot of the people in charge, the teachers were, people that were on the same background of understanding for what I wanted my children to be educated in. And so I didn't have those problems that most people have. And when we did, it's because we were on the school boards reading, the curriculums and all of the stuff that they wanted to put in the agendas. So it all falls back on the parenting. We cannot leave the state to educate our children, period.
Amen. That's sort of like what I said earlier, is that I feel like no parent is perfect. I'm certainly not a perfect parent. I don't put myself on a pedestal or anything like that. But I think once you're aware that this is going on, you can't unsee it, and you sure as hell cannot not do something about it, right? So if you didn't know what was going on before, or if you thought CRT was just something great and you didn't realize how bad it really was, once you become aware, if you're a good parent, you're going to fight back against it 110,000%, because our kids should be our number one priority, and it is nobody's responsibility other than our own to protect them. So if this stuff is creeping in their school system, it is our job and our job alone to get it out. It's our job to instill values in them, and like I said, equip them with the knowledge, right? So for me as a mom, my daughter, I knew at some point this could be creeping into the schools. I personally watch church with my daughter. I've instilled a good foundation for her. But then I also tell her and explain to her in no uncertain terms, there will be people that try to push these things on you. These are wrong, and here is why. And I explain it to her so that when she's met with these teachers, she recognizes it before they have a chance to sink their teeth into her. You know what I mean? You have to take responsibility for your own children and equip them with the tools and the knowledge so that it's almost like teaching the basic concept of stranger danger, right? You teach your child not to get into, a vehicle with a stranger or not talk to strangers, but this is something just as important. It's if there's a teacher that is teaching you this or that is saying this, it is wrong and you need to tell me, and here's why it's wrong. So it's sort of like so many parents, I feel like, have put the responsibility of teaching these things onto the school, but once you wake up, there's no excuse. You can't let it continue.
Piggy, writing on what you said, Heather, I understand parenting is hard and there is no manual, there's no book on parenting, but that doesn't mean that it's going to remove the responsibilities for parents to try their hardest. I mean, it starts with basic concepts like, sitting at the dinner table and having a discussion. What did you go over at school? Who did you talk to? I understand that the children right now are under heavy influence. I've been screenshotting the stories on Snapchat since my 19-year-old daughter was in 6th grade. And, I've put out information. I think I actually gave James, I sent to James, some of the screenshots that I was seeing. So don't think that they're not being brainwashed even outside of the school. TikTok is one of the biggest, collection of data for CCP and for all of this other, agencies that are trying to infiltrate our country. Don't think that they're not already infiltrated in your schools, in your medical system, in our banking. Communism is something that they want us to give into. And the children are being brainwashed as we speak, whether it's at the school libraries with those books that they're reading, but also with the technology. The technology is the leading cause of, most of the children rebelling against their parents. It used to be, yeah, sure, watching Disney Channel and yeah, parents are always stupid in there, or they're always lying to the parents, or they're ridiculing the parents, or parents shouldn't be here, there, or the other. But the other day I saw a story on Snapchat, and it was a transgender woman saying, hey, I want to tell you a secret, but I'm going to go downstairs because I don't want my parents to hear what I'm going to tell you, but you might feel the same way that I do. And I started to screen record that because I thought it was so important so that people can see how they're grooming the children, not just in the schools, but they're doing it through social media. I never thought to take away my children, their phones or anything like that. I want them to be technically savvy. I want them to be aware of the enemy's attacks. I want them to know what's going on. But that means that I'm going to now have to actively be engaged with my children and explain every single thing that they're encountering. So parenting cannot be done in a lazy manner. You have to, get up, shower, go with your child to wherever you need to be if they're not of, driving age for high school. But if you're, just make that effort, join the PTA meetings, volunteer at the school if you have the time. If you're working 24/7, then, I cannot help, I cannot help you any other way than, yeah, sure, at least have a call with the teachers. So for example, my son had to write an essay, and the teacher was very liberal, and I escalated. I said, well, you're going to write the essay, but you're also going to write why you don't agree with the essay, and then I'm going to bring it to your school. And then I escalated it to the principal and said, why is it that your teachers are imposing this garbage on my child? I let him write it the way that he was asking for the grade, but I also had him write it in the way that he needed to write it. Yes, it's extra work, but we brought it to the school, and guess what? My child no longer ever has to write anyway that, because it's diverse or it's inclusive and whatnot. So I don't care. I will fight the school back, and I will fight this crazy, liberal infiltrated teachers. I mean, it's not about division, but it's about right and wrong. And if it's wrong, you cannot serve two masters. And that is where I leave it. That's where I draw my line. You either serve God or you serve the Satan. That's it. There's no in between. You're not going to manipulate me with compassion and with all the inclusivity and the confusion of your gender and the words and all of that. I'm not going to put up with it. I'm going to tell it like it is. That's what I do with my kids' school.
I think that's a good way to think, Carolina, and appreciate you saying that. I want to, welcome to the chat. She just joined. This is Gabrielle Clark. She says that she has some insight. She just filed the first federal lawsuit against CRT indoctrination on behalf of her son. So I just want to welcome Gabby to the chat and give her an opportunity to talk to us.
Thank you so much, Eric. Yes, my name is Gabrielle Clark. I filed the first federal lawsuit against woke indoctrination in America. And my daughter was also socially transitioned, believing that she was a boy. And I created the program to pull her out of that cult. And that program is being used with some success all over the world. We filed the first federal lawsuit in December of 2020. And the lawsuit has since been resolved. But I gotta tell you, when we're talking about fighting this stuff, when you're talking about fighting this stuff, in the beginning of fighting. Yes, go to your school boards. I just went to a school board meeting last night, talking to Conroe ISD about their book issue, about the pornographic books in schools, at the behest of parents that I have been counseling in trying to encourage to utilize lawfare as a way of fighting back. Because let me tell you something: if you've received a survey of any kind in a public school, then you have a compelled speech lawsuit. And it is my view that if you're not filing a lawsuit based on your First Amendment, 14th Amendment, Title VI, and or Title IX rights, then you're not doing enough. And I say this because there are public interest firms that will take your case, and because of what I have done, because of that, I've paved the way for people to file lawsuits and recover money from those lawsuits. Now there are lawyers who are not public interest firm lawyers. There are lawyers that will take your case on a contingency. I find lawyers for people. I found lawyers for detransitioners. I have been doing every single thing I possibly can. This is my kitty cat's account because I've been kicked off Twitter. And so on my Gabs Clark 5, that's my main account. So if you have any pull in this space, please somebody get me back on my account. But anyway, I'm trying to write the book to help pull other children out of social transitioning, because we have people that are really actively fighting against medicalization. But what I'm seeing is that half of the children in urban areas are now identifying as LGBTQ. And what is going to happen to those children if they live in, like I live in Texas, if you live in a state that does not allow medical transitioning, underage medical transitioning, what's going to happen when those kids turn 18? How many kids are going to medicalize and their parents are not going to be able to do anything about it? Now, I've already created pathways for lots of different things. But if you're a parent and you are not filing a lawsuit based on your rights as a parent and your children's rights, then in my view, you're not doing enough. Because you cannot rely on your governments, local or state or federal, to do anything about any of this. There are, I don't know how many no left turn in education chapters in Georgia. They're barely scratching the surface. They've been fighting this for years. They've been fighting CRT in Georgia for years. And they have gotten, I mean, they've had some victories, don't get me wrong. But by and large, if you don't start hitting them where it hurts, if you don't start hitting them in the wallet, then there is not going to be any change, because there are billions upon billions of dollars being poured into this. And if you don't take away some of that, and if you don't chip away at some of that, then you can forget about the rest of it. You can talk to your blue in the face and they will laugh at you behind your back. They will, for each individual parent, they use what I call parallel language messaging. And thank you so very much, James, for all of your research, because I based all of my stuff on your stuff. And I'm going to tell you, I stole it. So whatever, sue me. You have to just go in there and get real raw. As conservatives, we are taught not to sue people because that's somehow underhanded. You better get over that. The liberals will go out and sue people. They'll go out and protest. But conservatives won't. Why? Because they taught us that it was a bad thing to do that? No. You better activate yourself and get out there and sue somebody, and get out there in them school boards and start protesting and start making yourself known and making yourself big and making yourself heard. Because if you don't, they will lie right to your face, and as soon as they shut the door, they will laugh at you. Just like they tried to do us. They tried to fail my son. They tried to keep him from graduating. But guess what? He graduated. You ain't finna do that to none of my kids. Everybody needs to get it in their head that you can't just, write a letter or go to a school board meeting or do this or do these these little things. Even trying to inoculate your children is not enough. They will find a way. You better get out there and fight fire with fire, figuratively, whatever. Not really. Don't light anything on fire. You know what I'm saying? Get out there and fight hard. Fight dirty. And do the exact same things that they did to us to get to this place. If you're not doing that, you're not doing enough. Every single person in here, if you have a child in school, if they have been given a survey, you look at that school and you find a way to sue them. Sue they draws off. Sue them blue. And somebody tell Elon Musk to let my account come back. Thank you.
I
Send
will
me
actively
DM
work
so that
to
we
get
can send it
your
to
account
Megan.
back. I will actively work to do that. And I
You're
don't
my
know your first name, but like oh my God, you just like inspired me. I had like goosebumps. Like this is exactly what every single parent in the country needs to have, that kind of fire, because we are fighting evil, and there's no line as a parent that you can cross that's going too far when it comes to protecting your kids. I mean, there isn't, and we have every single obligation as parents to do this. This is oh God, I really would love to hear more about your deprogramming book. So if I shoot you a DM, I would love to connect off of this and, maybe interview you, because I'm a journalist myself and I report on Real America's Voice. So I would love to interview you about some of the work that you've done in your lawsuits and stuff and help give you a bigger platform. Because I love what you're doing. And I think we need to start doing more to positively reinforce people like her, people like Project Veritas, Mario, Eric, James. You guys are doing such amazing stuff. And I think one of the biggest things that this cult has had going for them for so long was that people were too afraid to speak out because they didn't really have an outlet. They didn't have a place to go where they would be positively reinforced for that. Well, now these whistleblowers coming forward to Project Veritas have that place where they can go, and they are met with a whole team of people that support them in what they're doing. And all of these followers, I mean, every time somebody comes out, you guys, that they're going to lose their job, but then the Project Veritas army freaking fundraises and, helps pay their bills for the next several years. And it shows that the majority of people are behind them, that when you leave the cult, there is a huge amount of support for you waiting on the other side. And so I think we're really at a cultural paradigm shift right now where this cult really is losing their grasp on things. But 100%, we need to start suing, because lawfare is one of the number one things that they're using against us and we're not using in return. So return fire 100%. And please, I'm going to slide into your DMs, Gab. So I hope you reach out.
And
Heather,
Heather, I want to say one thing real quick. Gabs, you're in my neighborhood, so definitely we have the boots in the ground. You need support, just also get with us. And I work a lot with Heather behind the scenes, so she's amazing, and she will give you a platform if you choose to do that.
I speak to anybody. I speak to everybody. If somebody asks me to come out and to their school board, if they ask me to go to Austin, I go to Austin. If they ask me to come to Conroe, I go to Conroe. I was with Julie Jamon when they tried to when they kicked her out of the YMCA. Antifa broke my finger. I'm not afraid to get up in Antifa's face neither. I do all of that because I've made this my whole life. I've made this my entire life. I want parents to understand. You do not have to keep being afraid. If they call you a racist, call them one right back. Shit. Don't listen to them. You don't have, stop letting them tell you who you are. If they call you a homophobe, then tell them you're trying to trans the gay away. Get out of here. You're a homophobe. If they say you're just a transphobe, forget you. I love Liza Minnelli impersonators. I do not want that pedophile reading to my kids on the weekends. There's a difference. You have to figure out what it is, those avenues to fight back and get indignant. Use your righteous indignation against them and use their own stuff against them. I will go right up to a white man Antifa guy and be like, you with your white privilege, get out of my face. you don't have to keep on playing nice. And I feel like in my view, conservatives spend too much time playing nice and trying to be respectful and all of this here. They're trying to cut your baby's titties off. You don't have to be nice to them. What you being nice to them for? They're trying to hurt you. You don't be nice to people who are trying to kill your children. I mean, this is the kind of attitude I think that is missing from all of this. They've cowed us into compliance by telling us that if we have passionate discussions or if we fight back vigorously, then we are somehow unhinged. You want to see a bitch get unhinged, you start fucking with her kids. Then you gonna see that. Because I'm not gonna be nice to you while you trying to take my daughter away from me. You gonna see some realness. You gonna see the real when you try to take my kids. And every single person needs to get like that.
I just feel like it's important that it doesn't have to get to this point. So I think what Project Veritas is doing now, exposing this and showing that this man is undermining the parental authority in the classroom. He knows that he's doing it. He's turning the kids against the parents. Like, that's the point. That's the line. Right?
Tiffany,
So
but we're
social emotional
past
learning
that
is
point.
meant to destabilize the child. It's that the way I think of it is when you have kids and you say to your kids, like, if you get a funny feeling in your tummy, if you think that mommy and daddy aren't going to like that, then you should stop and think about it, right? Like, trust yourself.
Tiffany,
Social emotional learning is meant to undermine that response, that fight or flight response. And so I'm interested to see what happens, what comes out, what this gentleman says now when he really opens up to Project Veritas about what his motivation is for doing this, because I think it is very telling. But the line shouldn't be, they have socially transitioned my child at school, and now I'm trying to figure out how to save them from this transgender cult. The line should be when you try to tell my kid that there are more than two biological sexes, or that home isn't safe. That's what they're saying. They're saying home isn't safe. School is safe. That's why they have all those safe stickers, which are ridiculous. You should tell your school, get all of those stickers out of the school. This is a safe place nonsense. And that's the line. And I think Gabs is totally right. We need to be indignant, but before it gets this bad, like, immediately, don't undermine my parental authority with my child.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say is we're past that point. Me being a Hispanic and a minority, we have been the nightmare to a lot of this indoctrinators that have come into the schools. So I understand the perspective of Gabs. I think that some of the situation here, and I don't want to go with the race and all of that, but the Caucasian crowds are way too nice. Once the Hispanic community, the Black community woke up and we said, no, you're not about to come and indoctrinate our children. We draw that line there. We're past that line of being nice and kind and caring and loving and all of. We're not there. We're in a full-blown war against our children, and you cannot be nice in a war. So unfortunately, I get it. I just know that at the level that we're at, 100% of the people will not even believe, that we are in I would say 99.99% of people in our country do not believe that there is a war waged on our children as we speak. They're past those lines. They're past, just communicating. They're past, oh, you have to be nice. And so they've already infiltrated us. We're above and beyond, like our nose is barely above the water. So I'm going to side with the situation with Gabs. So you have to go through the measures of suing them and getting them out. And like I said, if you think that we can be nice to these people, I would highly suggest that you go into the schools yourself and put yourself in that situation, because we are like 75% liberals to like one per every radical. It's overpowering our children. So no, we're absolutely past the point of being nice. I don't think that it's fair that, yes, the Caucasians can't go to the level that Gab and I can for us being minorities, and we can openly call them out, and they can't call us racist. They can't call us all that. I think it's ridiculous. I think that we should, become more than anything parents, and go as parents, regardless of the color, and say, I don't want my child to be shoved this garbage down their throat. Remove it immediately, because this is what my tax dollars are going for. And so I don't think that we should even consider any type of mercy on these sexual predators that are in our schools. None whatsoever. I mean, when you think about it biblically perspective, you got to, tie a rope around them, throw them over the ocean. That's where we're at right now.
I first of all, I love the conversation. What Gab said, Carolina, very lively. Thank you both for your comments there. And also to Heather's point, she actually reminded me of something. A lot of people know that Project Veritas does undercover videos, right? That we go undercover and record people. But we also have a very big whistleblower insider program where we welcome people to come to us with information. It can be video, it can be documents. So, in the education system, that's no different, right? So if you know people who are inside the, Department of Education, inside certain schools that are very corrupt, anything education related that, they're willing to blow the whistle and come to Project Veritas, we don't just have to work with our undercover journalists. We can have these whistleblowers come to us. So that's a great reminder there, Heather. And I know here, Eric Weinstein has joined our space. So I would love to get his thoughts on, if you've seen the videos we put out in the last 2 days and, the overall conversation we've had so far.
Yeah, good to be with you. Let me just, first of all, say that this topic is a topic unlike any other, and it produces a kind of unity, particularly on behalf of parents who are not cowed, where there's almost, look, first of all, I've had James O'Keefe on my podcast. He and I have a very clear disagreement about certain kinds of undercover reporting. And I don't think what he's doing is wrong, illegal, or historically different than what journalism was. But I'm very uncomfortable with the uncover stuff. That doesn't change. However, I will say this. If there was ever a place to use undercover work and to use the lying, which I believe James was actually doing on the phone, giving a name that was not his, it would be in defense of our children. And what we're talking about is a change in our understanding of the need to balance type 1 versus type 2 error. There are some tiny minority of people who are clearly neurologically processing things as if they were one gender and in the body of somebody with a different phenotype. But that is not the majority of what's going on. The majority of what's going on is irreversible reproductive mutilation. State-sponsored, party-sponsored, government-sponsored, normalized. And the idea that we're going to be cowed as to whether or not we speak up on behalf of our daughters and our sons with respect to irreversible reproductive harm, which may, for example, have effects on the ability of a family to continue. You are building the woke, and this is an address to them. You are building an ultimate coalition where people will share a stage who agree on very little, who have very little in common in politics. Coming from a long line of progressives, we were all about working families. This is anti-family. So anything that is against working families, and this is absolutely against working families, we're talking about a form of concentrated evil with the backing of one party. And that's my party. I'm not a Republican. There's no part of me that wants to become conservative or a Republican. But we are talking about anti-progressives. This is regress into some sort of thing where we try to, so far as I can tell, get people whose families are too weak to withstand it to join a cult and give over in loco parentis rights to people who have absolutely no understanding of the long-term implications, and to abdicate all of our responsibility to proper sexual and gendered development and teaching. You have to recognize that when people say that gender and sex are socially constructed, that argument doesn't go the way they think it does. If you wear a kilt or a lungi, you are wearing male attire in Scotland or India, respectively. And the fact that it looks like a skirt has to do with the fact that these things are not set by nature. They're set culturally. And it is therefore essential that every culture have concepts of what it means to be a reproductive adult in the predominant paradigm. Now, I'm all for gay marriage, and I'm all for gay couples raising children. But the workhorse is the heterosexual couple. Yeah, you can put your thumb down, Caroline, but I'll tell you something. I am on the front lines of this battle line and I will fight with you against anybody who comes after our children. And we can fight, you and me, about whether gay marriage is legitimate or non-legitimate, or whether you think that I'm some sort of a libtard or a progressive nutcase. But the key point isn't that. I may not be comfortable with James. I may not be comfortable, Caroline, with you, but I will stand shoulder to shoulder with anyone who comes after our daughters and sons. And what we have to recognize is this is some kind of war where an in loco parentis system has decided to undermine families. And whatever you think our loyalty is to the Democratic Party, you've got another thing coming. I will break with the Democratic Party over this issue and the Epstein issue. I mean, let's face it. We had a whole movement called Me Too, and we had one called Time's Up. And when it came to saying I will risk my life potentially to push the Epstein question as to whether or not this person was a member of the intelligence community, almost everybody chickened out. It's so quiet you can hear a pin drop. And what I keep saying to people is the problem with young women, for example, is that we don't love them enough. We don't love them enough to give them good advice, to tell them what's actually going to add up to a happy, productive life. We don't love them enough to tell them when they're making terrible, tragic mistakes. And we don't love them enough to be parents and say, over my dead body. If we have to move to 100% homeschooling, then so be it. But what we cannot do is we cannot allow for the normalization of irreversible reproductive harm to balance the type 1, type 2 error problem. And what I will leave you with in closing is I had dinner not too long ago with a trans man. And the trans man was very clearly trans from a different perspective, from a different era. And what he was saying was, this is an abomination. The number of people, this is him speaking, the number of people in my category who should actually be getting irreversible. Sorry, the call came in. The number of people in my trans category who should be getting irreversible surgery is almost zero. And what we're doing is we're creating an abomination. So the fact is, we've not only lost conservatives, we've lost progressives, and we've even lost radical trans people who cannot stand to watch children pushed towards the chainsaw of irreversible reproductive mutilation and harm. Thank you very much.
Eric, I have a question for you. Wait, can I just ask? I have to ask this question because it's one I struggle with every day. If you want to start talking about some of these things with people who have no idea, right? Where do you start?
Well, I'll tell you where I start, which may be a different place than some of the conservatives on this panel. I start from a place of love and compassion because one thing I know is that I know that almost everyone intuits that this is wrong. But they can't figure out a way of speaking out and opening their mouths and saying something that isn't going to get them labeled as if they were opposing, let's say, gay men with Pray the Gay Away 50 years ago. Right? The key fear among progressives and liberals is there's always a curve, and we think of ourselves as always being ahead of it. And as society has gotten kinder and more understanding and more inclusive and less discriminatory, we're not done with that work, but it's certainly gotten a lot better. You've created a crisis in the activist community which says, how can I get so far ahead that I'm not at risk within the progressive movement? So, for example, you could decide that your cause is that you are going to normalize puppy play and sexual deviancies, which I think that consenting adults have every right to in their bedroom, but they don't have the right to teach them in school. Whatever it is, people will go and try to become the most progressive person you could possibly be in order to demonstrate how far ahead your thinking is. For example, animal rights where animals should be given the vote. You know, that would be like a psychotically beautiful progressive thinking, where you try to come up with the farthest out thing to prove just how decent, good, and forward-thinking you are. And this has nothing to do with progressivism. Absolutely nothing. This is a kind of mental illness. Progressivism means like working your ass off to try to help coal mining families, or working your ass off to try to find real forms of discrimination that are holding back brilliant Hispanic and Black kids who should be, leaders in their field, getting rich and leading our country into a strong position. What you're seeing now is a form of mental illness that has been disguised as progressivism because many people don't understand the history. People don't understand that somebody like Cesar Chavez was for strong borders because he didn't want illegal immigration destroying the supply curve for labor. So people have a completely insane idea of what progressives are because these psychotics have come in and tried to take over the progressive movement. Now, with that said, to your point, what can you do? The thing you can do, which is the hardest to do, is to lead by becoming hated, right? I'm going to get hate because I appeared on a stage with something that says Project Veritas. I am going to lose followers. People are going to say, well, you appeared there, so we don't have to listen to anything you say. And they won't listen to the fact that I disagree with James O'Keefe. They will only say, well, you platformed him. Well, guess what's going on? We are coming up with a coalition that says hands off our effing kids. And the number of people, when you start hearing a parent's righteous anger about this, you understand what you're messing with. This is like Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And where are the moms? Because I'm going to just push this back on the women here. Mothers Against Drunk Driving did something that Dads Against Drunk Driving probably couldn't do. Dads needed to stand up to Jeff Epstein. Now, where are the dads on Jeff Epstein, and where are the moms on irreversible reproductive harm? That's the right division, because fundamentally, the power of mom is incalculable. And when we see women not banding together to say, I've got 3 kids at home over my dead body, we're talking about something that could potentially lead to actual revolutions wherever this is practiced. If there's anything more sacred than the U.S. Constitution, it's a child. A child doesn't have a vote. A child depends on adults. And in this world where we've removed all of the adults, it's like there was a genocide of the adults in power. And my feeling is that, okay, I've got a PhD from Harvard. I'm next to James, who's got a PhD in mathematics, same field as mine. We need to get as much credibility and firepower and as many divisions where we are peering with people who we totally disagree with, but we come together around this one point, which is we're parents, we're grown-ups, those are children, they have no vote, they have no protection. And what we are talking about is an actual form of honest-to-goodness 21st century evil. And we need to talk about it. And the last thing I'm going to say is, one of the places I really don't appreciate getting into fights with my conservative friends is there are a tiny number of people who are probably in the wrong bodies, right? And if we don't acknowledge that, we lose. We need to acknowledge that that is a tiny category, and the vast majority of people affected by this are people going through normal reproductive development who we don't understand require adult direction to form healthy sexuality. And that could be healthy gay sexuality. There's no question that gay is highly conserved across cultures. I don't exactly understand why evolution selects for it, but nobody does. It's clearly built into the framework. Trans is probably built into the framework because of things like persistent Mullerian duct syndrome, which is an intersex issue. We have to get compassionate about intersex, and we cannot listen to the trans activists who are coming after our kids. Thanks.
So,
thanks, Eric.
If you're just joining us, Twitter Spaces, Project Veritas, expose on Teaching Lab, caught trying to subvert Georgia state law on teaching CRT and admitting that Teaching Lab, this nonprofit, is actually a scam. We've been joined by Eric Weinstein, who, if you've listened to anything he said, he needs no introduction at this point, but very, very articulate guy, educator, academic like our friend James Lindsay, mathematician, Harvard guy. He's going to get a lot of questions. First, we'll go Gabs.
What I like to say about Eric, thank you for doing that and making that step, because what I say to all the men who stand up to this, and they do have a position, is I say, congratulations, your balls dropped. I am so proud that you're actually at least coming to hear us out. That's not meant to be an insult. I'm just saying we need the men to stand up, because the reason why we're in this predicament is because men, at the end of the day, when they go to see the creator and they're in judgment and they're going to say, what did you do with the men with the children and the women that I gave you? And so I encourage more men like Eric, whether they're whatever background, to at least stand up for their children, fight for their children. I absolutely commend you for that, Eric. Thank you so much for doing that. But again, we can't be lukewarm. We have to at least, stand on the side of right or wrong, good or evil. I don't think it's anymore about right or left or Democrat or Republican. This is flat out now about evil versus good.
Well, let me ask you, did you detect any kind of equivocation on the basic morality of this in my voice? Even if you and I are divided by politics, I would think we were united on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, if I were to have a conversation probably deeper with you, I would find that you're more of a moral person to stand up for children. So maybe if we don't play with the wordings, with the labels, we can probably get a lot farther. And that's my advice as a community, because again, I'm coming into this arena to fight, from actually like a foreigner's perspective. Even though I was born in the United States of America, I did not grow up in this country. So I came into my own country to find the hard mess of what, all these infiltrators have put into the minds. My thing was so baffling that actually men or women had more say on some of these critical things that I saw in my childhood, the men being the one solely responsible to protect me and protect my mother. Well, I didn't have them, but, protect the females and the children. So I was discouraged to see, coming back to my country, that men were being silenced, emancipated, abused. And I have a son, and I'll be damned if anybody's going to disrespect my son. And I will definitely not put up with anybody, having to say that men are not responsible for this, because at the end of the day, we all know that you guys have strength, and men are more, skilled in a lot of different things that us women are not. And so for me, it's almost out of character to have to go and stand up and fight.
Charlie,
I expect my husband to fight harder.
It's not true. This one is different, right?
Well, yes, I agree. Different battles.
But
yes.
I'm just trying to say, there was this mom in Texas who was watching all of these police officers not go in an active shooter situation. And she hopped the fence and she got her kids out. And it bothers me that we watch the Academy Awards, we watch the Golden Globes, and we don't have an award for like Mom of the Year. And part of the reason that I think so many women are confused about their role in the world is that we keep celebrating men. And I want a poster of this woman. By the way, she poses in like heels in a dress after hopping this fence and saving her children.
I agree, Eric, but that's not at the expense of ridiculing men. Doing what they're doing. We're seeing what they're doing to young men, to young
children. I understand this, but what I'm trying to say is, if you look at nature, the most frightening thing in nature is a mom where you've gotten between her and her young, including, for example, like crocodiles. If you come close to their unborn eggs, I've been hiking in the Sierra Nevadas my whole life. I've never been warned about male bears the way I've been warned about female bears. And just to be very clear about this, the men are ready, willing, and able, but too many of them are afraid because they're going to be called all sorts of names. They may lose their jobs, they'll lose their prestige, all of these things. And on the Epstein one, we've got a sexual predator. If you know what happens to sexual predators in prison with males, men know how to take out the trash on predation, sexual predation against children. In this case, this is something where, because reproduction is so tied, female is the original essential gender, with male being created from female by the addition of SRY protein, which is almost the only thing coded for on the X chromosome. If you put the SRY protein on an XX human, you're going to see phenotypically a male presentation. And if it's defective, you're going to see a female presentation. This is down to one protein. But it is almost certainly the case, Carolina, that what we need on this particular topic is leadership from the females. And if I'm talking to you about the Jeff Epstein thing, it's not because I'm ducking out. It's not because I'm being a pussy. It's because ultimately the way in which people react, is this one for mom or is this one for dad? I think the Epstein one is one for dad, and I think this one is one for mom. And it's not a question of abandonment. Basically, I'm your backup singer. But you have to take the lead. The moms, this should be mothers against irreversible reproductive harm. You should recreate the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And you should march in the streets. And if I can just ask everyone to look up the Rosenstrasse protest. One of the most badass things in human history was when a bunch of non-Jewish women in Nazi Germany went into the street against Adolf Hitler and said, "We want our husbands back, damn it." And you watch who backed down. I think we're not in touch, and I don't know, Caroline, what country you grew up in, but almost everywhere there's a special place for when you've pissed off the moms. When you piss off the moms, you piss off the wives, and they show up in the street, not with some stupid pussy hat, not with some ununderstandable list of complaints, but you just have one topic, which is you cannot come after our children, which you have taken in loco parentis rights over. You will find that there is nothing like moms standing shoulder to shoulder. And I feel like we've all forgotten this, and I'm sorry, but it just makes me crazy.
Eric, can you check out Moms for Liberty after you leave this space tonight? Just throwing that out there.
Sure, I don't know about it, and
all right,
I hope if it's a good thing that it'll grow. And I'm looking at Moms for Liberty. Thanks.
Thank you,
Eric. Okay, I wasn't saying that mothers or women shouldn't have a responsibility. What I was trying to say is that we are in the predicament that we are in because we have shifted the balance. I don't think necessarily that women aren't as important as men. What I'm trying to say, because if we want to look at it even from the biblical perspective, Mary alone told Jesus when to perform his first miracle. The guy was like, "Woman, what is this to you?" Right? So I'm not saying that. I mean, the woman spoke 7 times, not nearly enough for what I would have done. I mean, I can't even stay quiet 1 second when I see injustice. So what I'm trying to say is that in the world that we live in right now, we are seeing a shift where men are not given, the authority that they should have, or at least the equality. We're past that point of shifting towards, feminine. I think the last wave of feminism is the most toxic. I don't agree with it. I teach my daughters to have respect for the man, and the same way for my son. I wasn't saying that,
I didn't interpret you wrong. No. All I'm trying to say is men are being told not to be male. Women are told not to be Women are being told not to be maternal. Whatever that is, stop listening. Take the clock back. 50, 70 years, whatever you have to, and remember what works. And Caroline, what I'm talking to you about is strategy. Strategy is so many parents are doing this in an isolated fashion. We're sitting at home talking to ourselves and our friends saying, what dystopian world am I in? Am I like Dorothy, who landed in some version of Oz in which all adults have been killed? Whatever the adult genocide is, we have to repopulate the positions of power with adults rather than these people posing as progressives.
Well, I mean, I want to make a point too, because I think as far as like the erosion of women having that maternal instinct, look at what's being pushed. In addition to all the LGBTQ stuff, you have a society that has been grooming young girls now for a while into believing that their bodies are something that should be casually given away, and then their babies easily expendable through things like abortion. Even if you agree, like, I'm not even going to make this about abortion, like, regardless of it, the very concept of telling a woman that baby inside of you is easily expendable, right, creates a disconnect from the mother and the pregnancy. And so, like, over time, now you have people like Elizabeth Warren, saying, oh, women are turning down great job promotions because they don't have adequate childcare. I'm sorry. God forbid you actually get to spend time with your child. No job is more important than your job as a mother and your job to raise and protect that baby. That is your number one job. And it's such a rewarding job. And you have these like far woke people like that pushing this idea like, oh, just get an abortion. It's not a big deal. Just, put your child in a daycare at 6 weeks. It's not a big deal. And I'm not knocking. If you got to pay your bills and you got to do that, fine. But don't devalue your job as a mother, which is the number one thing that we
Heather,
should be.
And living with people's means, because if you have to tighten up the belt and budget wisely, get into a small apartment. I mean, I feel like the entire country has been brainwashed to live up to unrealistic expectations of absolute debt. So it is not that difficult. I mean, there's so many things you can do to feed your family. I'm telling you, because I have a very supportive husband of 20 years, and I chose to stay home 10 years of my life, and I read every book I could think. I enjoyed my life. My children are musicians and mathematicians, and I mean, they have a wonderful life, because I train and taught my children to live the type of dream with the expectations of me as someone who expected more of them, because at the end of the day, the children, okay, are going to be what you expect them to be, no matter what. So if you don't teach your children these values, they're going to be astray. They're going to believe anybody else. Eric, what I was trying to say with the whole mother-father thing is that why would anybody cheat children out of having a father and a mother? And we're just living in such society that they don't even understand the concept of family. I chose to raise my children, suck it up, not go to school for whatever long I could. And if I had to feed them beans and flour tortilla, a couple times a week, just so that I wouldn't go above my means, so that I could be there with my child, and so be it. But I've never had my children in a daycare. I've never had any, and if it was bad situation with, my husband was laid off or whatever, and guess what? Let's pack our stuff, downgrade our lifestyle, and give my children the opportunity to be with the mom and the dad. Do you know what I mean? So,
Caroline, I do. I'm about to
unrealistic.
leave the stage, so I'll respond in one way. I have many sympathies with your perspective on male, female, on the importance of parenting, of having at least one stay-at-home parent. However, what I'm going to say to you is careful with the 100% and the applause, because you're not going to love what comes next. But I think it's good advice, and we'll get through it.
I have something to say about it, but
no, I know, and I'll leave so you can say definitely have the last word. But here's what I would say: everything that you load on top of this issue is going to lose you coalition partners. So, for example, some people on this stage probably think that it's an abomination to have two men raising children. I don't. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean I can't understand the perspective. Maybe we're going to find out that there's a hidden cost, and you'll be right and I'll be wrong, whatever. But the key point is, I'm here, and I may fight with you on the stage over many things that you said. Like, for example, I believe very strongly in early reproductive rights to terminate a pregnancy, and I believe very strongly that you don't have such rights so easily as the pregnancy goes on. You may think that's an abomination. Whatever it is, if we don't load all the extra stuff, which may be very energizing to conservatives, you will have a coalition that will save your children from being mutilated at the suggestion of the people that you gave your children to be educated, right? To the teachers and the administrators. Right now, the most important thing is not to go after the big package about how do we get back to traditional values that put children first. The most important thing is to win. And the most important thing here is you don't want, I think, to keep loading more and more onto this package and watch more and more people leave the stage and say, I just couldn't stomach the whole goddamn conservative package. Right now, if I'm politically very far away from you, the fact is we can come together on this, and then we can find out that we have a lot more in common over time. I think my vote is that you start with irreversible reproductive mutilation for people who are having normal questions in the process of sexual and reproductive self-assembly, directed in part by society and by parents. If we can stick to that without getting into the whole conservative versus liberal understanding of the workplace and women's roles and whole business, you'll have a win as opposed to a muddle. Because if you muddle this thing, you know who's going to win? It's the people pushing DEI. If you don't muddle it, and if you're razor sharp and clear, and you don't put all the conservative stuff on it, you're going to absolutely destroy this, because the number of us who are going to come together to save our children is enormous and cannot be stopped.
I can tell you from a ground roots activist.
We have a couple of hands up. Let's go to some of those hands. Eric?
Gabs was speaking there.
Gabs
was speaking.
So
thank you, Eric.
As a boots on the ground activist, I can tell you that trying to create bridges to fight with other groups and make that our baseline, that has been something that we have done. And I don't know if you're aware, but there's, I don't know how many groups of mothers out there: Moms of America, Moms for Liberty, No Left Turn in Education, Parents Defending Education. All of these groups have all been fighting this fight for the last few years. I mean, I was one of the first to actually activate enough to start, and that was because I reached out to No Left Turn in Education. Now, as a person who's been doing boots on the ground activism, especially as it pertains to women's rights issues, I can tell you that one of the reasons why women are very afraid to go out and protest and stuff like that in the same way that they did for MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, is because we're getting beat up by grown ass men. Okay. So, and when we ask for, and not only that, but there are women who are doing this job. And when the men come to help us, then they have an attitude. Billboard Chris has been relentlessly attacked by radical feminists. My account has been nixed. It wasn't by a trans rights activist. It was by radical feminists who mass reported me because I disagreed with abortion. So we've done everything we can to try to reach across the aisles to try to extend. If you look at Matt Walsh has been relentlessly attacked by radical feminists. So we do need men to come out there and stand in the gap to be with us when we're trying to activate. And let me just please tell you, there have been women to get beat up. I've got a broken finger because of it. Several other women have had broken fingers, sprained ankles. There have been, some of the women have been arrested. There have been women spit on. We're having to field all of that. And we begged for men. And I can and I can also tell you that men do not need permission from women, and they do not need the go ahead from women to stand up for society. You think Billboard Chris went out there and said, "Hey, y'all think I should do this?" No, he went out there and did it his goddamn self because he's a grown ass man. We don't need this person or that person to do this or that. We need everybody to do everything in every single direction, in all shapes and sizes, because our entire society has been captured.
To Eric's point, I do want to point out on the progressive side of things, there's actually an amazing organization called Gays Against Groomers. I think they were actually at Turning Point's recent event in Arizona called America Fest. So there are groups, even on the left side of things, that, like you, Eric, are coming out in support and in defense of our children and
Gays
standing
Against
up against
Groomers
this
is
stuff.
conservative, honey. They're conservative.
Is it? But what I mean, like his ideas, like, well, him and Carolina going back on the gay marriage and homosexualities and stuff like that. My point is that there are groups of gays or former gays, like the Changed organization, which is former LGBTQ, that are now no longer living that lifestyle. But there are groups that would be considered conservative, or not conservative, more progressive or left leaning, that are coming out in the defense of our children. So I got to jump off here. I've been on here for a little while, but I just want to give Eric a quick shout out too for taking the opportunity to step on a stage with people like Project Veritas. I mean, seriously, hats off to you. I grew up in Massachusetts. I have a ton of friends that are hardcore Democrats, and I love them all the same. So I just want to give you a little hat tip for being willing to put yourself out there and join the space.
And to add to that, Heather, we are our brother's keepers. And Eric, I'm not going anywhere. I love to be here and talk to you anytime. We're not going to run away from the situation, from the battle. This is about our children. This is about their future. And I'm sure we have a common ground on that.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. I'd like to give the floor to Billboard Chris, but one thing I will say on, Eric, I loved what you were saying about the idea of this, irreversible reproductive changes. And, I want to point everybody, it is a Project Veritas space. Some of you guys might have seen this. We actually released a story back in October of 2022 on WPATH, which is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And we actually had a doctor on a video that was internal that was leaked to us, talking about reproductive regret and the idea that a lot of these minds of these minors are too undeveloped to actually be making these kinds of decisions. So for anybody that hasn't seen that, I encourage you to go to our website, look up WPATH, gender affirming doctor, expressing the concern for the mental health capacity and informed consent of these minors for these transition surgeries. So I'll open the floor to Bill or Chris. I know you've been trying to get in for a little while.
Thank you. I'm very heartened to hear all these people talking about this issue affecting children, because for 2 years and 4 months now, I have been standing out on the street having more than 10,000 conversations with people all across North America about this issue, doing the only thing I could do to create awareness about it. And no one was talking about this 2 years ago, and now everyone, especially on the conservative side, is talking about it. So that's great. Now, I'm in a little bit of a grumpy mood because a medical professional who dared to associate with me lost her job today simply for associating with me. This is the third medical professional who has been either seriously investigated or lost their job for simply talking to me. And so I wanted to speak to that point about people marching down the streets. It's just not possible for a lot of people to do this because our world is totally insane. But of course, I'm completely in agreement that we should be doing these things. I do want to say something about Moms for Liberty. Eric was talking about the need for moms to get involved. Well, they are involved. We have 110,000 moms in Moms for Liberty doing all the groundwork, flipping school boards, going to school board meetings, taking on so much crap in their personal life because they're just regular moms, just like I'm a regular dad, and they're pushing back against this behemoth. And you know what? They need to get support. Their tweets should be getting retweeted. They should be getting followed. They should be getting the love from these elite names who speak out about these issues, yet have never heard who they are, because the grassroots movement is already there. They just need to get a little bit of love. And I'm a little embarrassed that not everyone knows about them, because they're doing tremendous work. And if everyone does not know about Moms for Liberty, they need to pay attention, because this groups like Parents Defending Education, other groups that are forming like the Mom Army, are doing phenomenal work already. So let's not talk about how there's not enough moms doing stuff. They're already there. We just need to support them. Thank you. That's my rant.
Thank you for that, Billboard. I also wanted to get in the conversation here. Mary Rook, I know she's a reporter with Daily Caller. I believe she's been following the Project Veritas stories and engaged there. So, Mary, talk about what you found. If you, what are you working on in terms of education stories or anything Project Veritas related?
Yeah, so I actually got to talk a couple times today to someone with Teaching Lab. And I just thought it was really interesting the way that they framed some of the wording. When I got back to them, I would ask them questions like, kind of nailing them down on like, do you sell curriculum nationwide or do you sell it within Georgia? And they'd write things back like, we're not currently partnering with any schools in Georgia, or we're not currently doing that, insinuating that, obviously we're not going to say we weren't doing it in the past, but as of today or this minute, we're not. So it's clear that they're on, kind of on their heels. The first message they sent back to you was pretty similar to what I think everyone else got nationwide. And then the second one, they, admitted to getting money from the Bezos ex-wife, Mackenzie Scott, and that kind of doubling down. And then also in the second one, they refused to talk about Bostic. So
interesting.
There was nothing else said about him and his employment. So
the first time you heard from them was today, or was it last night?
Yeah, no, it was this morning.
Okay.
Early this morning.
And then they followed up. So the first time you talked to them this morning, they were willing to discuss Bostic. And then the second follow-up, they avoided the conversation on Bostic.
Yeah,
is that correct?
There was no mention of him. Yeah.
That, goes back to a point that I was making earlier in this space, where, their first statement here was of a statement that appears that they were trying to distance themselves from Bostic. And, now that the second video came out where he's clearly criticizing Teaching Lab itself, and with your information that they were avoiding him even more, I can't possibly know what's going on behind the scenes, but what, I guess I could take your thoughts or anyone else on this panel. What do
Right.
you,
I can't insinuate that
right,
that's obviously what's happening because I
right.
sent my request before, but my other request, knowing what was going to be sent out, was obviously a little bit more detailed, and they
Yeah.
were not interested in talking about Bostic.
We shall see how that turns out and within Teaching Lab and Bostic's relationship with them, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I
I
think
wanted to,
for those that are
sorry.
listening, for the first time and they weren't here last night, one of the first things that the Teaching Lab did to distance himself from Bostic was remove him from the staff roster on the website. And they actually went further. They actually removed the entire staff roster. So it really makes you wonder, what is it they are trying to hide? Are they trying to hide the names of these other educators that they're affiliated with? Are they just trying to protect Bostic in that moment? But I still believe, as of right now, the Teaching Lab does not publicly advocate or show a staff roster. That's completely gone.
Yeah, and I think the whole point is to make it harder for people that do grassroots politics to be able to get a hold of them. If you are not in politics at all, it's hard to get contact information with anyone within higher up nonprofit organizations or inside DC. And so if you can take down an entire roster, then people can't even search names or LinkedIn or do anything like that. So it's obviously protective measures to make sure that their company doesn't come after, like no one comes after them even more. The problem is, though, as we've spoken, pretty much throughout this entire space, is that moms have been activated, and there's no longer a place to hide when you have parents coming in defense of their children. And especially when it comes to education. I mean, during 2020, when people were sending, screenshots of what they were finding out that their kids were learning, it was entire group messages of parents going, how did we miss this? How is it that we have spent this entire time with our children and gone on family vacations and we talk to them every day, and yet we had no idea our children were carrying down white guilt for random reasons? It's like insanity. So I think that, when you're taking down entire rosters, it speaks to the growing power of parents and knowing that there is going to be a storm coming behind all of these kind of outrages. It's not stopping. Like, there used to be people like us who would see these things happen. There'd be this big thing in the news and then nothing would happen for another year. But now it's like week after week after week, we're taking ground. It's no longer being pushed back. It's may not be, yardage yet, but we're taking inches every single time we put a play down. So I think it's great.
Absolutely. So I'm going to add in a few of these other people I see. Quite a few of you are requesting. We've had a few speakers drop off. I'm going to add, a couple more in. If you don't make it into the space, I think we're going to continue it on for, another 15, 20 minutes or so. So we'll try to get a couple new voices in here. And, if you don't get in and get a chance to speak tonight, definitely come back. We intend on hosting more of these spaces. As we continue to go throughout this year, we're working on a lot of different investigations. Each space will probably focus. We want to continue, getting people updates on all of these relevant stories. But that being said, as we continue to go, feel free. You can always chime in.
Can I really
about
quick
previous
chime in,
stories.
Eric? I just wanted to
Yes.
chime in and remind people that even when the space ends, because it's recorded, they can go back and listen to it. So by retweeting it or sharing the space yourselves, it gives other people the opportunity to go back and hear the recording and listen in later. So it's really helpful to do that. And also, I invited Ian in. I'm not sure if he's able to speak. I saw him down here as a listener, but in case he requests, maybe pull him up here if you can. I invited a few people in, so I'm not sure if they're able to join though. And thank you guys so much for the work you're doing and just the continued effort. It's amazing stuff. And just to be able to, reach across the aisle and have Eric in here and all of that, I think Twitter Spaces are so underrated for what they're capable of. And I'm happy to see Project Veritas hosting your own spaces. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So, like I said, I'll let some of these new speakers. I see everybody raising their hands. I guess we'll start with P-Dog. The floor is yours.
Hey y'all, my name's Marty, also known as P-Dog Night on the internet. You can find out about me up from my profile. But I just came in here actually to just shout out to Gabs and Billboard Chris, the people who are out there actually doing this work on a regular basis. I talk about this a lot, and I have a YouTube show in the mornings, Monday through Friday, and I talk about this subject probably every third or fourth day. And I want the only thing I came on here to do was to change a phrase, because I get so tired of hearing the words gender affirming care for children. Okay. It's not gender affirming care. I want you to, anytime you hear that or anytime you use that phrase, I want you to change that phrase to gender affirming harm, which is something I just came up with. I was talking to my wife and I was like, it's not gender affirming care. It's gender affirming harm. Because I'm sorry. Oh, someone was talking there. Because, we know that, the puberty blocker thing and the cutting off body parts and shit, it's not helping kids. We're going to have this, I say this all the time, we're going to have this huge mental health crisis, especially in girls. Hearing stories about where, half of a class of girls are claiming to be bi or trans or lesbians in 6th, 7th grade because they see the rainbow flags, they see the indoctrination. When people talk about grooming, it's not, while it is sexual grooming, it's also ideological grooming. And just because people want to validate themselves by indoctrinating kids into this, but they don't realize that, these things that they're encouraging kids to do is creating harm. I know this has not a whole lot to do with the drop from Project Veritas, but, which I'm going to probably talk about tomorrow on my show. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. And, thank you for letting me, put in my 2 cents.
Appreciate that. We'll move on to Melissa. Are you there, Melissa?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm a parent of 3 kids, 2 that one is in 7th grade, and the other one is in 3rd grade. And right now, in the state of Iowa, we are trying to pass a bill to give us universal, a choice to send our kids anywhere we want to go to school, so we can get out of the public school system. Because right now, I'm very involved in many of the school board meetings. I speak at most of them. I have been kicked out of many because I, stand up for what many people feel and say things that nobody else wants to say, and I get shut down. And I feel like my voice falls on deafening ears. So I'm very excited for the state of Iowa to move forward with the option for parents to finally have control over where they can send their kids. Because right now, I feel like my son, especially in 7th grade, is being indoctrinated with so many things that, for example, he learned this past year how to, in health class, how to make crack cocaine and inject it in his arm. They give an example. They told him exactly how to make crack cocaine in class. I don't even know how to make crack cocaine. He came home and explained it to me and said, and then they told us how to inject it, and people inject it in their arm, Mom. And I was in shock. I was like, what? And that's when I finally learned that, okay, my son is not getting an education. He's being indoctrinated. And I just, where do we draw the line? Because I have some parents who say, kids need to learn about these things because they're exposed to it nowadays and they need to know everything. But my child is only 12 years old and it still is developing. He hasn't even gone through puberty yet. I mean, anybody?
I think normalizing those things is very detrimental, to be honest. So I think you did the right thing personally. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah,
My bad.
no, I would say, if there's schools teaching your child how to make and use crack cocaine, I would say send that to Project Veritas at veritastips@protonmail.com. We would absolutely be all over that. So that is our tip line, for everybody out there that doesn't know. If you've got anything for us, we're actively on our tip line 24/7. Veritas tips at protonmail.com or on Signal 914-653-3110. You can reach out anytime. You can send us direct messages on our social media channels. We're always looking for inside information, tips, leads, especially in these schools. So, anything like that comes up, definitely send it our way. We'll go now to Chris.
All right, thank you, Eric. First, I want to say I appreciate everything that you guys at Project Veritas do. You guys are patriots. You're doing a fantastic job bringing, truth to light in this country. Everyone, we need to support groups like Moms for Liberty. While, a lot of us are pushing for the federal government and the state governments to do their job and stop the grooming of our children in our schools, we need to support groups like Moms for Liberty that are pushing to help elect people who stand for our parental rights and will put an end to the grooming of our children. And another thing you can push for, folks, like we're doing here in West Virginia, and I was a proud co-author of, is we have legislation in our state legislatures in session now that is going to ban these so-called therapies and transgender surgeries on anyone under the age of 18. We have to protect these children. We have to restore parental rights. And you don't have to wait for the federal government to do it, folks. That's the beauty of it. You can get involved. Run for your school boards. Run for state legislature. Step up. Get involved. That's how we're going to put an end to this. We can't wait on a faraway capital to take care of this for us. We got to start at the grassroots, get involved, and get this done.
Thanks for that, Chris. Let's see. Is it Kino Reviews? You got the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much for sharing the information regarding the tip line. If you actually check the thread for this chat right now, I posted a link to Carlin Bosenko's Twitter thread of Autistic Sex Education webinar that was behind a paywall. Her community leaked that to social media. I encourage you and Project Veritas to take a look at that and share it. I am not shilling for Carlin. I am bringing awareness to the fact that the transgender community is now targeting the most at-risk youth, which happens to be autistic children in special education classes in the U.S. public school systems. So,
thank you. Yeah, I know, Dr. Bosenko. I'll definitely check that out. I had not seen that yet. So,
well, it's available on the thread.
It's
available on the thread of this particular channel right now as we speak.
Got it. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. All right. Well, we'll go to, is it Theodora? The floor is yours.
Yes. Hi. Thank you. My name is Theodora Trufayan. I'm from New York, from Long Island. And I started about 2 years ago to attend as many Board of Education meetings as I possibly can. And then I narrowed down my interest and started attending the committees that fit my interest and what particularly I'm trying to quote unquote fix. And I found like-minded souls. I used peaceful protesting a lot. Basically, I had signs, and in the beginning I was completely alone. And then other parents just gravitated to me, and then we started forming groups, and we had very big rallies here on Long Island the past years under the banner "My Child, My Choice." And now, as of yesterday, I am a contributor with the North Shore Leader. You might have heard of the North Shore Leader because it recently came out nationally as the first local paper that exposed George Santos, basically back in September of last year. But now, not only do I attend my Board of Education meetings as a parent and a taxpayer, but I also am now a contributor to a local paper. And oh boy, my Board of Education just loves this. And I'm now basically reviewing open meetings law and making sure that there's not only comment, but there's also a Q&A. And everything's on the record. And as of this morning, I am participating in an audit. I'm trying to figure out how exactly my public school district obtained funds from New York State Department of Health during COVID and how exactly they used them in order to implement all the COVID-19 mitigation measures in the schools, including masking. We have a bill for the vaccine, the plex enclosures, the 6-foot circles, the eating in your classroom and never having recess, and all of that we had here in the past 2 years. So I'm basically creating this audit, and I'm going to be writing about it in the Nurture Leader. So that's, as a taxpayer, you don't have to be a parent to go to all of your meetings. You could just be a taxpayer. So try and encourage, there should always be one of us at every single meeting, and they should know it. 2 years ago, they refused to talk to me. I refused to wear a mask. I had my red signs, unmask the kids. This is child abuse. And they would call the cops on me, and the cops would smile because I wasn't breaking any laws. Hello. But anyway, I had security trailing me in 2021 at every single Board of Education meeting I attended, even with my 3 kids. Yes, I had 2 security guards accompanying me everywhere. I don't know why I was so special. And today, I'm treated with respect. Suddenly they want to talk to me, and suddenly they're very polite. And I feel like in the beginning I was really rough around the edges, and now I'm someone that they have to figure out how to deal with because I'm not going away. So those were my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think for those of us that have been, in the space the entire time, there's a recurring theme that keeps coming up, and it's attending these school board meetings. And I just, I know that we've seen as a result of our work, specifically last year out in Sacramento, California, this large uprising of parents getting to the school boards in response to a story of ours, and it's an encouraging thing to see, and definitely. A well taken point for everybody in the chat. I hope that that is how you can make the impact. I think that we've got one more person that's going to speak here. I see Shapeshifter in the chat. The floor is yours, and then after this, I think we'll wrap up here shortly.
Everyone, thank you for letting me speak. I'm detransitioner, biological male. Had my quote-unquote sex reassignment surgery when I was 24, and I 100% regret it. At the time I saw it, I was 100% convinced I was a woman, and everybody was affirming me. Therapists never tackled my childhood trauma, never just ignored all my comorbidities and cleared me for the surgeries that ruined my life. So I 100% regret it. So I'm not sure how the hell people seeing kids can know what they want. I pretty much destroyed my body in the pursuit of something that's impossible. My mental health is worse than ever. My body dysmorphia, which I confuse for gender dysphoria, is worse than ever before. So please protect your kids from unethical surgeons. Protect your kids from thinking that they need something is wrong with their body. Don't let them become cash cow for the big pharma, because I have to pay for hormones for the rest of my life. That's all. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. I think that's an incredibly powerful thing to hear you say. And I know I mentioned it before, but to point people back to our WPATH story that came out last year, you're hearing this firsthand from doctors. I mean, they're saying that this reproductive regret is very real, and it's becoming more and more prominent. So
right.
The idea, yeah. So thank you so much for jumping on the space, and we'll kind of just wrap it up here for everybody that's joined. I'll let Mario kind of break down for everybody, just kind of where we're at with this story of the teaching lab and what we can expect for tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And thank you all for speaking tonight. It was very, very, I learned a lot from everything I've heard from all of you. So thank you all who spoke, and thank you all who listened for about 3 hours now in this space. So as Eric said, we will be releasing a new video tomorrow where James has a sit down with this individual, Dr. Quentin Bostic from Teaching Lab. A lot of the questions tonight were around, how do you talk to people that think this way and indoctrinate children this way and think so differently from us? Well, tomorrow is a good opportunity for you to see exactly how that went. James obviously is a very talented, intelligent man, and he was able to convey very intelligent questions and points over and really, really get into Dr. Quentin Bostic's mind as to why he thinks the way he does and why he does what he does. So we have that. And also I would like to encourage all the listeners on now to continue to share the videos on social media, continue to drive the attention to what we've exposed, as well as looking here to get, more comments or reactions, be it from the Georgia state government, be it from, Teaching Lab itself. I can't stress this enough. The power of the people to really, take the journalism that we do and go out and demand, what you think is necessary out of this story on your own volition is truly crucial here. Project Veritas can't do what we do without the supporters and the viewers that we have. So again, thank you all for this. Please also consider, as we are a nonprofit organization, to donate to us. Our website is projectveritas.com/donate. We depend on you guys to continue the work that we do. We will never stop. To us, nothing is more important than journalism. That's why we put journalism first, and any other thing that we, that's out there that, all these organizations depend on comes second to that. So, again, consider sharing our videos, consider donating to us at projectveritas.com/donate. And we will have more for you on Quentin Bostic tomorrow. And you can bet we'll have a lot more stories for you in 2023, especially around education. Thank you guys again, and have a very good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone.